modern airliners are among the most complex and reliable machines in common use. But occasionally, delays in fixing a known defect have led to disaster. This is the story of one of the most terrifying and avoidable accidents in recent history. When a 747 suffered a devastating explosion at high altitude, the crew and passengers faced an unprecedented crisis. It is also a story of how one family's grief led to a relentless investigation to uncover the full, disturbing truth.
Lee can't have died for nothing. You know, you've got to find out why he died, and you've just got to make sure that it never happens again.
And it reveals how other known problems in aircraft design have continued to go uncorrected, causing further avoidable accidents.
So would I be surprised if it happened again? I would be surprised if it didn't happen again. It is a matter of time.
One of the most shocking cases of a known design flaw being ignored for years would finally take its toll on a United Airlines 747 bound from Honolulu to Auckland, New Zealand. As Flight 811 prepared for takeoff, the crew were concerned with another kind of threat that had recently led to tragedy.
We were in the aftermath of Lockerbie, and I had instructed the crew to be particularly aware because it was a through flight from Los Angeles going through to New Zealand. So in my pre-flight briefing, I had asked them to make sure that they checked any baggage that looked suspicious or anything because we wanted to be extra cautious.
Flight 811 was heavily loaded, 337 passengers, packed cargo holds, and a full fuel load. The doors closed on time, and the plane left the gate just before 2 o'clock in the morning for a routine 8-hour flight.
Well, we were going to New Zealand on vacation, someplace that we had really thought was interesting, and somebody had told us how beautiful it was, so this was kind of a dream come true.
I was seated in what's called the upper deck. I hadn't had a vacation in 5 years, and I took all my Mileage Plus points from United Airlines, and I purchased a business class ticket to Auckland, New Zealand, and Sydney, Australia. I was going to finally make that dream vacation I'd always wanted, to get to Australia and lay on a beach somewhere and forget about airplanes, forget about accidents, and get this out of my mind for a while.
On the flight deck, Captain Dave Cronin was hugely experienced, just 2 months short of retirement.
Rotate. I flew almost 35 years with United. I've got over 30,000 hours of flight time and just about everything, military as well as civilian. My co-pilot, or first officer, was Al Slater. And I've known Al at that time for probably 20 years. And the second officer, Mark Thomas, was the first time I had flown with him. But we got along real well.
Tell them we can handle 33 if it's available. Okay.
The pilots wanted to climb to 33,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean to avoid turbulence from bad weather.
We did notice that there were thunderstorms 100 miles south, right on course, which was rather unusual for that time of night. So I left the seatbelt sign on.
Captain Cronin's decision to keep people fastened in their seats would save the lives of many.
We were still climbing out, and the seatbelt sign was still on, and just basically getting ready to serve beverages and then to tuck everyone in for the evening because it was going to be a long flight down to New Zealand.
Okay, tell them we're going to detour over to the left.
Center, United 811 Heavy, we're going to be detouring. Some weather here, it'll be to the left, of course.
100 miles from Honolulu, As Flight 811 climbed through 23,000 feet, a critical malfunction was about to occur. There was now a huge air pressure difference between the inside and outside of the aircraft. Suddenly, passengers sitting just above and behind the cargo door heard a noise.
Then there was kind of a grinding noise.
I heard like a thud.
The hell?
In the next nanosecond, it was pure, unadulterated pandemonium.
We lost number 3. Going down.
It looks like we've lost number 3 engine and we're descending rapidly. Coming back.
The next thing I knew, I found myself on the stairwell, hanging onto the rungs, and I immediately knew it was an explosive decompression.
The cargo door had torn off and ripped a huge section of the plane with it. The pressurized air inside blasted out with explosive force.
I immediately thought of Lockerbie. We actually thought it was a bomb that went off.
It was hell on earth. Everything on the airplane that wasn't fastened down, tied down, or secured became airborne. The noise was incredible.
Everything in front of us was gone. Where we were sitting, we were about 6 inches from the hole, so there was nothing in front of us or to the side of us. The whole side of the plane was gone. Actually, our feet were dangling on the hole, and I first thought we weren't going to make it. You know, I just didn't think there was any hope.
With the pressurized air blown out, the lack of oxygen at 23,000 feet was now suffocating the passengers and crew.
It felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach, knocked the wind out of me. And I remember trying to catch my breath and couldn't. You were supposed to grab those oxygen masks and put them on, except the oxygen masks in that cabin, they were ripped out of the ceiling and they weren't there. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what it feels like to suffocate.
United 811 Heavy, we're doing an emergency descent.
The pilots could tell from their instruments that the number 3 engine was failing, but they couldn't tell the full extent of the damage. Their priority was to get the plane down to a level where they could breathe normally.
Put your mask on, Dave.
But the pilots didn't know that the explosion had destroyed the entire oxygen supply.
Can't get any oxygen.
We're not getting any oxygen. You getting any?
I can't get any either.
With the plane heading steeply down and no word from the cockpit, the cabin crew feared the worst.
I remember thinking that the cockpit, which is up in the upper deck, had probably blown off the airplane too, because as far up as we could see, there was nothing there.
Now we're doing this nosedive. My next thought was, oh my God, we're just going straight down. We're going to crash into the sea.
With its airframe ruptured, severe damage to the right wing and engines, and the crew forcing it down in an emergency descent, the problems on Flight 811 had only just begun. Two minutes after suffering a devastating explosive decompression, Flight 811 was still in a steep emergency descent, passing rapidly through 15,000 feet to reach breathable air.
United 811 Heavy, say your altitude now.
Leaving 15.
United 811 Heavy, we're out of 15.5.
United 11, roger.
I think we blew a door or something.
Tell a flight attendant to get prepared for an evacuation.
The crew finally began to level out at a safer altitude, but they now faced a barrage of problems. The most immediate was the disintegration of the number 3 engine, nearest to the explosion.
We don't have any fire indications? I don't have anything. Okay, we lost number 3. Let's shut it down. There's no M1.
Yeah, okay. Ready for number 3 shutdown checklist.
Number 3. Before you shut down number 3, the generator went off. Looks all right to try it now.
Well, let's stop the vibration anyway.
Fuel jettison procedure. Main boost pumps. On.
Center, United 811. We need the equipment standing by. Company notified, please.
We got a control problem.
Roger.
Center wing. Left, right. Valves. On.
Start dumping the fuel.
I am dumping.
One stewardess had been seriously injured by falling debris. As Laura Brentlinger helped her, the full gravity of their situation suddenly became clear.
As I'm holding her in my arms, I looked up, and as I looked up, that was the first time I saw this tremendous hole on the side of the aircraft that was just a void, and seats were missing, and I immediately knew that we had lost passengers.
5 rows of seats had been blown out in the decompression, killing 9 passengers. On the flight deck, the crew had turned the stricken plane back to Honolulu, but with 80 miles still to go, the crisis now got far worse.
We got a hell of a control problem here. I got almost full rudder on this thing.
Are you dumping as fast as you can?
I'm dumping everything.
We got a problem with number 4 engine?
Yeah.
Debris from the explosion had also damaged the number 4 engine. If it failed completely, the implications were severe.
If you're on 2 engines and you weigh 700,000 pounds, that is a big deal. Simply because with that kind of weight, 2 engines are not going to keep you in the air. You're going to come down.
Can you maintain 240?
Yeah, just barely.
We're losing altitude.
Know it.
Center, United 811 Heavy. Do you have a fix on us?
Affirmative, sir. I have you on radar.
Okay, we've lost engine number 3, and we don't have full power on engine number 4. We can't hold altitude right now. We're dumping fuel, so...
United 811 Heavy, roger. I show you 60 miles south of Honolulu at this time.
Roger.
I haven't talked to anybody yet. I can't get to them. You want me to go downstairs and take a look?
Yeah, let's see what's happening down there.
I think we lost a compressor, but...
Can't hold altitude.
Yeah, I told him that we're
Put
gonna...
some max on there. I got takeoff power on this thing.
Whatever you need, Captain.
Although the number 4 engine was failing, the pilots pushed it, along with the remaining engines, to full power, a setting they should not be run at for more than 4 minutes. But the nearest land was 15 minutes away.
I look out the window on the right-hand side, and I see flames, big flames. And I know what flames in an engine means. It's not good.
The pilots were unaware that the number 4 engine was now on fire.
You got 250 knots now, that's good. 7,000...
Yeah, we're getting more rumble.
Watch your heading, watch your heading. You want to go direct Honolulu.
Okay, I'm going to go downstairs and see what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
Go ahead and run down and see what's happening.
I saw the flight engineer descend down the stairwell. And when I saw him, my relief was, oh my God, they're alive. And there was a huge sense of relief for me. He saw the hole, turned as white as a sheet, and I screamed to him, dear God, please get us down.
We've got a fire out there.
Oh yeah, we got a fire in number 4. Go through the procedure. Shut down the engine.
We're not going to be able to hold this altitude on 2.
We got a fire on the right side. We're on 2 engines now.
The whole right side, it's just gone from about the one right back to it's just open. You're just looking outside.
What do you mean?
It looks like a bomb.
Fuselage?
Yeah, the fuselage, it's just open.
Okay, it looks like we got a bomb that went off on the right side. The whole right side is gone.
Yeah, from about the one right back to,
Anybody?
some people are probably gone. I don't know.
I knew that we had lost people. I didn't know how many. In fact, I didn't know until the next day how many were lost. But, you know, it's a terrible thing when you're a captain of an airplane and you lose passengers.
Lee Campbell, flying home to New Zealand, was sitting in row 10, just in front of the cargo door.
I woke up with such a start because I'd seen Lee standing by the bed, just with a grey jacket over his arm and a small smile on his face. And of course, as I woke up, it faded, wasn't there. And then we woke up in the morning, we discussed this. I said, oh, that was strange in the night, but it was such a vivid dream. Lee was standing there. And then the radio came on, and the first item of news is that there'd been a problem with the United aircraft. And I said, that was Lee, that's Lee's. And my blood just ran cold. I knew he was dead from that moment.
Center, do you read? We evidently had a bomb or something. A big section of the right side of the airplane is missing.
United 11 Heavy, roger.
I wouldn't go any faster than I had to because that hole, I mean, I wouldn't get it over 250 knots because that's a big...
Okay, what's our stall speed?
I wouldn't go below 240.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna make this.
We didn't know that we were going to make it back. So we were actually preparing to ditch that airplane at night in the Pacific Ocean, which has never been done before.
In the cabin, the crew prepared for the worst.
My training kicked in and got up from my jump seat and started instructing the crew. We have to prepare the cabin. We have to, prepare for a ditching, which I thought was inevitable.
You're running around getting life vests on, and I do remember thinking, I'm not sure this is going to matter, because when we hit the water, I just imagine the plane's going to split apart.
I knew that if we hit the water, it'd be tantamount to hitting the ground, and there would be very few, if any, survivors. So my mind went to the things that meant something to me, and at that point in my life, it was my son.
Believing they were going to die, one passenger took these photographs in the hope they'd be found in the wreckage and give clues to the cause of the crash. For 15 minutes, the plane steadily lost altitude. Then, at 4,000 feet, the first glimmer of hope.
After an imponderable time, I remember one of the passengers began to point out one of the windows on the right side. And everybody looked. And we looked through this little window from wherever we were, and we could see a point of light, and another point of light, and another point. And pretty soon, you could make out a coastline.
Okay, I got lights over here.
Okay.
Okay, we're at 4. We're 21 miles out. We're in good shape.
At Honolulu Airport, an emergency was declared. All other aircraft were diverted, and the rescue services prepared for the crash landing of a fully loaded airliner.
Hey, you want to give me some speeds?
Yeah, 150 is going to be your 2-engine. Use a 160.
I need souls on board if you have it.
Okay, souls on board.
160 is the minimum.
Stand by, United 811 Heavy.
I don't know how many's on board. 200 and I don't have the paperwork in front of me here.
We're too busy right now. 200 and something.
Okay.
6 minutes from the airport, the crew now had to slow the overweight plane for landing. But the effect of this was unknown.
What's going to happen when I start coming out with flaps and landing gear? We're either going to land on the airport, in the water, or downtown Honolulu.
Okay, we'll try 10. Okay, inboards are coming to 10. How do the controls feel?
All right so far.
But the flaps were damaged and could not fully extend. This meant that Flight 811 would have to land dangerously fast.
United 811 Heavy, do you have the airport in sight?
It's over here to the right, Captain.
Okay.
Okay, we have the airport. United 811 Heavy.
811 is clear to land 8 left. Equipment standing by. Wind 05012.
Clear to land. 8 left, United 811 Heavy.
As the unstable 747 lined up for landing, the pilots knew they would only have one attempt. But even if they got it on the runway, the nagging question remained. Would the stress of impact cause the damaged and overweight aircraft to disintegrate? Severely damaged, with an unstable airframe and losing altitude on just 2 engines, Flight 811 now began its final approach to Honolulu Airport.
2-engine approach.
2-engine approach.
We still had no idea how far off the ground we were, if we were going to make it to Honolulu or not. But that seemed like an appropriate time. If we were somewhere around land, that we're probably going to try and land somewhere to get the passengers in their brace positions. So that's when we started yelling for them to get down in their brace positions.
Every molecule in my body combined to express, get this damn airplane on the ground.
Well, how are we doing on the hydraulics?
Hydraulics are good.
You got brakes?
Normal hydraulics.
So we got brakes, but you're only going to have reversing on 1 and 2.
Though I thought maybe there was a chance that we were going to actually be able to attempt to land, the thought came to my mind, what happens now? Do we, on impact, do we explode? Do we fall out this huge hole?
Despite dumping fuel, the aircraft was still critically overweight. But without full flaps to keep it in the air, it had to approach fast.
1,000 down.
The danger was that the undercarriage could shear off and the plane break up.
1.5 high. 190. 185. A little slow, Dave. It's below what we want. Coming up on the glide slope.
Okay. Well, let's try the gear.
No one knew if the explosion had damaged the landing gear.
I remember Laura saying to me that she didn't hear the landing gear go down. And it was loud, you know, it was still loud, and I didn't hear the landing gear go down. So that's another thought. Maybe they can't get the landing gear down. Maybe it's not down.
Got gear down, we're clear to land, and everything's taken care of as far as we know. $200. 195. Half a dot high. Looking good. 192. 195.
Coming off on the power.
100 feet. 50 feet.
Center the trim. Center the trim.
30. 10. 0.
We're on.
Gear's holding.
We landed. It felt fast. And that was my next concern, is that we weren't going to stop at the end of the runway, that we were just going to keep going.
And all of a sudden, we were slowing down, and I said, "Oh my God, we've landed. We're on ground." And the people started applauding.
Probably the best landing I've ever made. When we finally stopped on the runway, We deployed all 10 chutes, and the flight attendants evacuated all the passengers.
It's amazing how fast everyone went. My understanding is like less than 45 seconds, 330 people were off the airplane.
We were probably 20 feet off the ground, and I would have stepped out of the airplane without a slide. I wanted to get off so bad. Fortunately, there was a slide. I stepped into the abyss, fell into the slide, whooshed down to the bottom of the thing, and then you hit feet running.
The slide kind of kicked me up and flew me up into the air, and my thought was, oh my God, I'm going to survive this whole thing, and I'm going to get wiped out here on the evacuation, because it just really threw me. And I landed and scraped up my legs pretty badly and landed on my feet, and it wasn't until that moment that I had the sense of, I'm here, I'm okay, I'm on the ground.
When we got all our switches off, I ran through the airplane, made sure there was no one else on the airplane, came up to the door 1 left, and went down the slide, and I came around the front and I saw that humongous hole in the side, and I just couldn't believe it. By the grace of God, we made it, and it was an awesome experience. I would never want to go through that again.
It was crazy, it was wild, it was scary, all at the same time. I just thought that was the end, that we were going to die. I mean, that was my first thought, that this is the end.
But for the families of the 9 people who were killed, the ordeal was only beginning. Kevin and Susan Campbell's son Lee had been flying home.
About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think they said that there was no New Zealanders involved, but we just knew that it was Lee. And then about, I suppose, a quarter of an hour later, we got a phone call from Chicago, and they just said that they regret to inform us that our son was missing, presumed dead. And I guess about another hour after that, a policeman arrived at the door, and he took one look at us and he says, "I can see that you've had the news." So it was just an awful, awful day. And it certainly didn't get much better for a long, long time.
Although Lee's body had not been recovered, the Campbells flew straight to the wrecked aircraft in Honolulu.
Your initial feeling is that you want to be as close to the spot where your relative died, and that was the aircraft. So we had to immediately go in and see the aircraft.
The damage inside was horrific, just a total mess. And the hole in the side of the aircraft was much bigger than I had thought it would be, even though we had seen television newsreel reports. And it was so sad to get in and actually see where Lee's seat had been. The legs of the seat were still there. There was a good bit of fuselage beside him, and still a window.
But the Campbells' desire to find the cause of Lee's death inevitably brought them face to face with dreadful details.
They took us to the medical examiner's office as well, because they had found body parts and that sort of thing. So they didn't actually show us the body parts, but they showed us bits and pieces that they had recovered from the engines, and we got the medical examiner's report on what they had recovered. So, we really would have preferred that it was Lee that went through the engine, because it would have been an immediate death, whereas it was a 4-minute fall down to the ocean, and we know that the people could have been alive as they were falling. And when you think about that, that's just horrific.
As it became clear that their son's body would never be found, the Campbells' need to find the cause of the accident that killed him grew stronger.
Lee can't have died for nothing. You know, you've got to find out why he died, and you've just got to make sure that it never happens again.
The Campbells embarked on a relentless personal investigation that would last nearly 2 years. The loss of their son meant they would stop at nothing to uncover the truth.
The engines number 3 and 4.
2 months after the accident on Flight 811, when the National Transportation Safety Board held preliminary hearings, the Campbells made sure they were there. But they soon grew frustrated. The NTSB would not complete its report for months, so the Campbells took matters into their own hands.
We certainly weren't going to leave it to the NTSB to come up with the findings. We were going to follow through. And when the hearings ended, they had said that we could take whatever we wanted off the press table. And Susan walked up to the top table and yelled out, "There's a really good setup here." So grabbed a box and loaded in all of the documents that we could find up there.
Kevin's the most honest of people I know, but here he was taking something that we hadn't specifically been told we could take.
And we're heading out the door just as the NTSB were arriving back in with the trolley to pick up all their documents. So we were out the door and into a taxi and gone.
So we quickly realised we'd got a really good set of papers with a lot of things that hadn't been released to the public. We were able to really start our investigation in earnest at that stage.
The unpublished documents revealed a disturbing catalogue of problems with the forward cargo door, going right back to its original design. Instead of a plug door that gets jammed into its frame as the aircraft pressurizes, Boeing opted for an outward opening door. This allowed for more cargo space, but was not fail-safe like the plug design. So Boeing built what they believed was a foolproof locking mechanism.
What they do is they build in multiple redundancies to make sure the door is properly latched and does not open. And you build it in to a point of that it's extremely improbable that the door would ever open.
So what went wrong on Flight 811? The Campbells soon discovered that the problem lay in the design of the locking mechanism. To lock the cargo door on the 747, electric motors rotate C-shaped latches around pins in the door frame. A handle then moves arms, known as locking sectors, over the top of the C latches to prevent them from reopening. But as early as 1975, problems were found with the locking sectors. Kevin Campbell, an engineer by training, built a model to show the weakness in the Boeing design.
Initially, the locking sectors were made in aluminium, and in 1975, Boeing realised that they weren't strong enough, and they actually doubled up the aluminium to make it double thickness. But it still wasn't strong enough, and a lot of the airlines didn't even put the doublers on anyway.
The weakness of the aluminium drastically increased the risk of the door accidentally opening.
With the aluminium locking sectors, if the C-locks tried to backwind, open electrically, it would just push the locking sector out of the way. It just simply wasn't up to the job that it was designed for.
For 20 years, 747s have been flying with this crucial weakness. The Campbells wondered what else remained to be revealed. They redoubled their efforts to uncover the full truth behind the accident that had killed their son.
We bought a car and set off in the United States to see as many people who were involved with the accident as possible. We started at Seattle, down to Denver, across to Chicago, through to Washington, D.C., down to Kentucky, on to Miami, and back across to San Diego, back up through San Francisco, back to Seattle. And that was just one trip.
The Campbells soon found that a shockingly similar incident to Flight 811 had given clear warnings of the dangers in the cargo door. In 1987, 2 years before Flight 811, a Pan Am 747 had been climbing out of Heathrow when it failed to pressurize at 20,000 feet. The pilots had to turn back.
When they got back to Heathrow, they found that the door was hanging open 1.5 inches at the bottom, and all of the locks were open. When it got to the maintenance base, they found that all of the locking sectors were either bent or broken.
Why had the sea latches turned and bent back the locking sectors? Boeing claimed that the ground crew must have mishandled the mechanism.
The door had been closed manually, and what they said happened was that the guy wound the sea locks closed, 98 turns of a speed wrench. He closed the outer handle and then wound it open again. And if to be in the position that they were found in when the aircraft got back, he would have had to wind them open 98 turns. And this is just absolutely ridiculous.
But the Campbell's investigation uncovered another vital clue to why the sea latches had turned. A report by Pan Am engineers highlighted problems with the door's electrical system.
It had a fault in the S2 master latch lock switch that should have turned off the power to the door when the outer handle was closed.
This was an alarming finding. When the outer handle was closed, the S2 master lock switch was meant to disconnect the power supply and stop the sea latch motors from turning. So could this have failed, allowing the motors to open the door? To find out, Boeing asked the airlines to do a simple test. Close the outer handle, then press the switch to open the door, and see what happens.
When they hit the switch, it actually worked. The Boeing thought, you know, this is not going to work, but it actually worked. There was power to the door locks with the outer handle closed, and the lock started to move, and it started to force the locking sectors out of the way. And a few days later, the airline started ringing in and saying it was damaging their planes. So Boeing stopped the test. But it meant that on those aircraft, the S2 switch had failed, which is a silent failure. And all of those aircraft were likely to have the same problem as 811. They were just waiting for a short circuit to open the doors.
The Campbells now became convinced that the accident on Flight 811 began with a failure of the S2 switch. Power remained on to the sea latch motors. All it took was a short circuit in the 20-year-old wiring, which had been found to be frayed on other aircraft, to start the motors up. The aluminium locking sectors were too weak to stop the latches turning, and the cargo door burst open.
The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of this accident was the...
After waiting a year for the NTSB report, Kevin and Susan Campbell expected it to match their theory of what had led to the accident on Flight 811.
I assumed that we would have a report come out that this was an electrical malfunction, and was staggered when they came out and said that the door had been mishandled.
The report focused entirely on the fact that the door lock must have been mishandled by the ramp attendant. That was disappointing, and we felt that they must have been at a different hearing from the one we were at.
So how had the NTSB come to their conclusion?
There was other evidence that we had found during our investigation of improper procedures by the United mechanics and ramp people. So we were convinced that there was, we could use the word abuse being done on the doors. The doors were sort of abused and weren't maintained very well. We concluded that the probable cause was mechanical.
For the Campbells, the NTSB's failure to mention the electrical problems just wasn't good enough.
What they said happened was the door was closed, the locks didn't fully close, they just partially closed, just hanging on the pins, and then they closed the outer handle. But it just simply can't happen because that part of the locking sector is still intact. Just simply can't happen. You can't close the outer handle unless these are in the fully locked position. It's the only way that the outer handle will close. And just closing this manually, you can't exert enough force to actually damage this part of the locking sector. All it does is just butts up against there. If the locks aren't fully closed, it just simply butts up against them and goes no further.
They went back to investigating the accident on Flight 811 and soon found disturbing evidence of how it could and should have been prevented. After the Pan Am incident in 1987, it turned out that Boeing had issued a directive to the airlines on how to correct the weak aluminium locking sectors.
The airworthiness directive that came out was to replace the aluminum sectors with steel sectors that could not be bent. And there were some some interim requirements for inspections to be performed until what they call terminating action, the steel sectors were installed.
The fix was cheap and simple, but getting it done was not.
The actual cost of the modification, changing these locking sectors to steel, was $2,000 per aircraft. But it took 10 hours to do it, and that's where the money was. Taking the aircraft out of service for 10 hours, that's millions of dollars.
The Campbells found that back in 1987, the Federal Aviation Administration, who were meant to enforce improvements, had given the airlines 18 months to comply with the modification. Within a year, Lee Campbell and 8 others would die in an avoidable accident. So why weren't the airlines forced to fix the problem sooner?
If these airplanes, these large commercial airplanes, are grounded, it's an economic disaster. So what they do is they lobby in the regulatory agency in the United States, it's the FAA, to allow them to do the fixes over time when the airplanes are in for normal maintenance. And that way, they're not taken out of service. But when they do that, when they allow the airlines, the air carriers, and the manufacturers to fix these over time, in essence what the FAA is doing is they're gambling with the lives of the passengers and the crew that are flying the airplanes during the time they're not fixed.
After the deaths on Flight 811, the FAA instantly shortened the deadline for fixing the cargo door from 18 months to just 30 days.
It was only when United had gone from one of the airlines of first resort to one of the airlines of last resort in New Zealand that they just totally out of the blue, we got a letter inviting us over to see them. And when we got there, they were just going to do a PR exercise on us. But we just laid into them, pointed out where they'd all got it wrong.
And you could see them changing during it to realising that we did know what we were talking about and that we'd put a lot of serious effort into it.
One of them actually broke down because they'd never had to meet next of kin before. And it ended up with the Vice President of United taking us round the maintenance facility, and he had people running off in all directions just to get the information that we wanted, questions answered. We could go anywhere that we wanted, and everything was laid on for us because at that stage they realised that we really did know what we were talking about.
The pressure of the Campbells' campaign eventually began to pay off. The vital piece of evidence that could prove them right, the cargo door, still lay 2 miles down in the Pacific Ocean. But as articles appeared in the American press, the NTSB commissioned the US Navy to search for it. 100 miles south of Honolulu, a deep submersible began to trawl the seabed.
We went to Honolulu and waited there while they had their attempts. And they finally recovered the door from 14,000 feet of water, which was the deepest recovery ever at that time. and we were phoned within an hour of it coming out of the water.
But before the Campbells could see it, the door was swiftly removed to Boeing's plant in Seattle. The Campbells went in hot pursuit.
We went over to Boeing and they wouldn't show it to us. So they reckoned that the crucial pieces had gone to the NTSB. So again, we got in the car and drove across to Washington, D.C. We arrived at Ron Schleid's office, and Ron looks at his watch and he says, "I can give you 5 minutes." So about 3 hours later, we had the pieces that they recovered in our hand, and they acknowledged that we were definitely correct. It was an electrical malfunction, and that they said they would fix the planes, they would make sure it never happens again, but just don't hold your breath that the report will ever be changed.
Even with the evidence of an electrical malfunction in their hands, the NTSB refused to change their report. Then, in June 1991, fate intervened. A 4-year-old United 747 was sitting on the apron in New York when the C-latch motors started up and the door opened itself.
There was no way that they could hide it any longer. They simply couldn't deny that it was an electrical malfunction that was covering it.
After recovery of the door was that in fact the actual...
Finally, the NTSB publicly issued a revised report that concurred with the Campbell's version.
There was an inadvertent failure of either the switch or the wiring that caused an uncommanded opening of the door.
It's nice that other people know that you're right and had been all along, and that the support that they had given you was vindicated.
The Campbells spent thousands of dollars of their own money on their campaign. They were never interested in a financial settlement for Lee's death, but they did persuade United and Boeing to set up a university scholarship in his name.
I couldn't have lived with myself if we had done no investigating ourselves. It was just something we both felt we needed to do. We didn't even discuss it. We just knew that's what we would do.
Yeah.
But despite long and public campaigns like that of the Campbells, critics fear that the airline industry has not learnt the lessons from Flight 811.
The regulatory agencies, they have a dual charge. One is to encourage aviation, and another is aviation safety. And when they get in a position where you have economics up against air safety, they tend to err on the side of economics rather than safety.
Serious accidents caused by known defects have continued to occur. In the 1990s, known problems with icing on aircraft wings caused a series of crashes. At least 3 planes have had fatal fires due to known dangers from flammable insulation material. And in 1996, a fully laden 747 blew itself up when known faults in the wiring are thought to have ignited flammable vapors in the fuel tanks. Inevitably, experts are skeptical about the aviation industry's record of balancing profit against prevention.
We've seen the wiring problem both in United 811, which was eventually turned out to be the cause of that accident, and also in TWA 800, where we had an explosion in the centerline fuel tank. The industry answer to 20 and 30-year-old wiring, and when the wiring can fray, break, crack, cause a short, which can either ignite fuel, like in TWA 800, or open a cargo door, like in United 11, and what the industry says, don't touch it. Don't go in there. Don't inspect it. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to remove it, because it's so brittle that if you go in there to try to fix it, you're going to do more damage than you're going to do good. And that's what I call the ostrich approach to maintenance and safety. You know, we've decided that you can have a spark of ignition in the centerline fuel tank of a large air carrier. But so far we've been lucky. We've only had one every 10 years. We've only blown up 3 or 4 airplanes. You know, to go in and replace this wiring would ground all these airplanes, would be astronomically expensive. You know, 1 airplane every 10 years, 1 airplane every 5 years, 200-300 people, cost of doing business. Cost of doing business. And that's a great economic analysis, and unless your mother or your child is on board one of these airplanes that happens to pay the price for their economic satisfaction.
For some of the survivors of Flight 811, the cost has been heavy.
Each crew member handled it differently. I know there are still 2 crew members that have never set foot on an aircraft again. It was very difficult for me. I was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. You can't reason, you can't think. Making the slightest decision is very difficult. You're just at a total loss. So it was very difficult to cope with.
The crew of a passenger jet search in vain for their airport.
Look carefully.
Rain is making it impossible to see.
It's like missed approach. Go around.
More than 200 passengers are on board.
As I turned around, a huge fireball came out.
Investigators search for clues. Could a vital missing piece of equipment be responsible for the crash?
I think the best way to describe that would have been irresponsible.
I know a lot of people could have walked off that plane that night. Nothing will change my views on that.
Nimitz Hill, Guam. Once the site of fierce American offensives during World War II, for over 50 years there's been peace here. Now the hill is peaceful, invaded by hunters. And the normal quiet is broken by the roar of jumbo jets as they fly overhead. Every night, commercial pilots must fly over this tall, rocky outcrop and land at Guam's Agana International Airport. Flights come from airports all across Asia. Just past midnight, on August the 6th, 1997, Korean Airlines Flight 801 is on its way to Guam from Seoul, South Korea. 42-year-old captain Park Young-chol is at the controls. A former Korean Air Force pilot, Park has been flying 747s for more than 6 years. Just a few months ago, he received a Flight Safety Award from the President of Korean Air for successfully handling a 747 engine failure at low altitude. Park is supposed to be flying to the United Arab Emirates tonight, but a scheduling change has put him in command of this shorter flight to Guam. In the cabin, Korean, Japanese, and Western tourists are heading for Guam's pristine beaches. Guam is a U.S. territory run under U.S. law. The island is tiny, fewer than 600 square kilometers, but there's enough sand to keep people coming. 24-year-old Sean Burke and his girlfriend Wendy Bunton are planning to make the most of Guam's beaches. They're flying in from San Diego for a vacation.
Sean and Wendy were going to Guam to do some scuba diving, reef diving, and at the same time, they were going to visit her brother, who was in the Navy over there. He was a Navy doctor.
Flight 801 is taking Barry Small back to work. He's returning to Guam from New Zealand for another 6-month contract as a helicopter pilot. But he does it with a heavy heart.
The night before I left, my father had a heart attack, and I had to CPR him till the ambulance arrived, and decided to cancel the contract so I could help him. But he was insistent that you must carry on with your job.
The flight is still a couple of hours from Guam when the calm evening is brutally interrupted.
Watch the speed. It could be severe turbulence. Make an announcement to have everyone in their seats with seatbelts on.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer speaking.
Even an experienced flyer like Barry Small is surprised.
There was no lead up to this turbulence. I mean, anybody that wasn't strapped down was going to be airborne, that's for sure. The lockers were rattling, and anything in those lockers was bound to break. It was a horrendous shudder.
It's heavy turbulence. But the crew ride it out. Eventually, the flight returns to normal.
We're through it. Let the passengers know.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer speaking. We have cleared the turbulent area.
But it's left some of the passengers shaken.
Shh. It's okay, Rika. We'll be there soon.
Ma'am, if you don't mind, I'm gonna move this duty-free up here for you.
The cabin crew cleans up. And the passengers settle in for the rest of the trip.
Because of the 12-hour stopover in Seoul and no change of clothes, it was getting rather uncomfortable in a tropical environment, and I took my shoes off just to relax a little bit and feel more comfortable.
Captain Park and his crew begin looking ahead. They know there's more unsettled weather coming. Rain has been hitting Guam on and off all day. In fact, August is the heart of the island's rainy season. Small showers can pop up, making visibility unpredictable.
In that particular part of the world, they have what's called a top hat thunderstorm. That is a very small thunderstorm that builds up all times of the day, and it's very short-lived, so it wouldn't hamper the pilot's ability to actually conduct the approach. It's going to just obscure his view for some period of time while they're transiting through it.
Just past 1 in the morning, Korean Air Flight 801 makes initial radio contact with Kurt Mayo, the radar controller at Guam's airport.
Guam Center, Korea 801, leaving level 410 for 2016.
Korean Air 801, roger.
The crew aren't the only ones preparing to land. After more than 3 hours of flying through the night, the passengers get ready for the airport.
I saw the lights of Guam, and I knew exactly where the aircraft was because I've been there many times before.
Captain Park has navigated Nimitz Hill 9 times before, but this time there's a major difference. At airports around the world, pilots land with the help of a glide slope, an electronic system that helps planes safely touch down. If pilots follow the directions given by the glide slope, It guides them to the foot of the runway. The glide slope beacon at Guam Airport has been removed for extensive maintenance. Without the airport transmitter, Park's glide slope indicator in the cockpit is useless. Landing without a glide slope is rare, but it does happen. In Guam, the transmitter is scheduled to be out of service for more than 2 months. But impaired navigation is only part of the problem. Captain Park is fighting exhaustion.
They make us classic guys work to the maximum. Probably this way, hotel expenses are saved on cabin crews and they maximize flight hours. Really sleepy.
Now, as the plane approaches Guam, clouds and rain block their way.
Captain, Guam condition is no good. It's raining a lot.
It's been several hours since Captain Park and his crew left Seoul. Now the rain is making the late flight more difficult. Tired and fighting the weather, the captain begins the final approach to the airport. August the 6th, 1997. It's close to 1:30 in the morning. On Korean Airlines Flight 801, a tired captain is preparing to land at Aganya Airport on the island of Guam. In the cabin, 237 passengers are getting ready to begin their holidays or get back to work.
The flight, other than the turbulence, was totally normal. We had our meals, and it was just a totally normal flight in every way.
As the jet approaches Guam, an erratic storm pushes rain and clouds between the plane and the airport. It's hard to see. The captain wants to make a small change in course to avoid the worst of the weather.
Request 20-mile deviation to the left as we are descending. Guam Center, Korean 801, request deviation 10 miles left of track.
Korean Air 801, roger.
Veering around cloud cover, Captain Park Young-chol struggles to get a clear view of his approach. And finally, he sees what he's been looking for.
It's Guam. Guam.
Good.
Today, the weather radar helps us a lot.
Korean Air 801, cleared for ILS, runway 6, left approach. Glide slope unusable.
Air traffic controller Kurt Mayo reminds the crew that the airport's glide slope equipment is out of service. It would normally help them find the runway, but since it's under repair, it isn't sending out any signals. Then, with the crew in the middle of their landing sequence, something unexpected happens. The glide slope appears to come to life.
Is the glide slope working? The glide slope, yeah?
Yes. Yes, it's working. Why is it working?
It's a confusing moment. Unsure what's happening, the crew continue to prepare for their landing.
60 check, gear down.
Check. Approaching 1400. Since today's glide slope condition is not good, we need to maintain 1440. Please set it. Set.
At 40 minutes after 1 in the morning, Guam controller Kurt Mayo once again makes contact with the crew.
Korean Air 801, contact the Aganya Tower 118.1.
He passes the plane on to the airport tower and says goodbye in Korean.
안녕히 가세요.
수고하십시오. 118.1.
It's the last time he'll ever talk to the crew of the jetliner.
The guy working here probably was a GI in Korea before.
Aganya Tower, Korean Air 801 to intercept the localizer 6 left.
Korean Air 801 Heavy, Aganya Tower. Runway 6 cleared to land.
Korean 801 Roger, clear to land 6 left. Flaps 30. Flaps 30.
As the plane descends, clouds and rain close in again. They've lost sight of the airport.
Look carefully.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing for landing at Aganya International Airport in Guam. Please return your seats to the upright position, fasten your seatbelt, and prepare for landing.
Set 560 feet.
As the plane flies closer to the ground, the crew expects they'll see the airport any second, but the rain makes it hard to see anything.
Isn't the glide slope working? Wiper on.
Then a computerized voice fills the cockpit. It's the ground proximity warning system, which tells the crew they're just 500 feet in the air. But they still can't see the runway.
I've done this flight many, many times before, and when I estimated we're about 30 seconds from landing, I bent down to put my shoes on.
200.
The plane is now just 200 feet above the ground, but still the crew can't see the runway. They're quickly running out of time.
Let's make a missed approach. Not inside. Not inside. Missed approach. Go around. Go around. Perhaps.
I had no doubts this was still just a normal landing, and the aircraft went on and was decelerating quicker than normal, but nothing to really alarm me. Things were getting pretty serious then. The aircraft was starting to break apart. I forced myself up to look, and there was just bottles, bags, everything you can imagine was coming out. Only way I can really describe it is like about 1,000 737s landing all at once.
On a wooded hillside in Guam, the shattered plane finally grinds to a halt.
I was too scared to undo my seatbelt at that stage because I was waiting for the next bounce to go over another ravine or whatever was going to happen next.
Miraculously, 11-year-old Rika Matsuda has survived and is virtually unhurt. But her mother is trapped and injured. Barry Small is also injured and terrified that fire is sweeping through the plane.
The fire started in the front and proceeded from the front to the back towards me. There was no floor lighting or anything like that, but the fire was so intense there was no problems to see where I was going.
If help doesn't arrive soon, those who survived the initial crash may be trapped inside the cabin.
Korean Air 801 Heavy, Tower, how do you hear?
Everyone in the cockpit has been killed. But airport authorities still have no idea what's happened aboard Flight 801. Hurt by the crash and desperate to escape the ruined plane, Barry Small stumbles towards an opening in the cabin.
I got back these six seats, and then there was about a 6-foot drop down to the ground. The undercarriage had gone completely. I come across an obstacle that I had to cross because it was the only part that wasn't burning.
Here, go! Get over it!
Rika's mother tells her daughter to get out of the burning plane.
Go now, get out of here! Go! Now go! You must go! Go! You must go now! Go!
The fire is spreading quickly. As passengers struggle to deal with the disaster, rescue workers don't even know the plane's gone down.
The fire engulfed both the Asian gentleman and myself, to the extent that it burnt my arms, and my watch got that hot it was melting into my flesh, and I had to flick it off.
Minutes earlier, Kurt Mayo had passed the passenger jet onto the local tower controllers. Now he learns it hasn't landed yet.
Approach Aganya. Did Korean Air come back to you?
No.
I cleared him to land, and I don't know where he's at.
He didn't land?
Negative.
Oh my God.
Within minutes, Guam Fire Chief Chuck Sanchez is en route.
I was thinking, my God, 747, where's it at? Is it on island? Is it on sea? What is the plan here?
We both fell off the side of the container, and the Asian gentleman disappeared into the jungle. So I rolled over onto my back, and I managed to crawl with my elbows. There was still a bit of skin on my elbows left.
Small has a badly broken right leg. He crawls away from the wreckage. Many more people remain trapped inside.
Lying there, it just sounded like a battlefield. It was just like a movie. Things were exploding short of me, going over the top of me. Things were landing beside us on fire. It's just indescribable.
There's only one way for emergency crews to get down to the wreck site, along a single access road that runs beside Nimitz Hill. As they race to the accident scene, rescue workers discover a major obstacle. A pipeline has been ripped out of the ground by the crash and thrown across the road. There's no way around it. Having heard about the crash, the island's governor, Carl Gutierrez, has joined the rescue team.
Engine Company 7, get this thing out of the way. You guys, get the medic kits and come with me.
We reached the closest point of approach to the crash site, which was up the hill and probably about another 150 yards downhill. Gentlemen, turn on whatever lights you got to guide us down this path, and let's do it.
We started running and just listening to the screams so we can guide ourselves
because there was just nothing but overgrowth on the side of the road.
At one point, I stopped him and I go, Governor, sir, I need you to make some serious decision in this operation, and I don't think I want you to move further. I'd like for you to stay on this side, and I don't want you to get hurt. Let us do this job. And he goes, no, I want to help you guys.
At the site of the crash, flames are devouring the wreckage. Hampered by his broken leg, Small can only look on as people cry out for help.
I lay at that bank for the whole night. During that time, hearing people call out in a foreign language, which initially sounded like good, healthy calls for help, then turned into screams as the fire got more intense. And after a period of time, the fire even grew worse, and the screams faded away.
Finally, almost an hour after the accident, Sanchez's crew reaches the site.
I split them up into 2 rescue and search units. I need half of you guys to start from the tail end, and I need the other half to start from the front end of this plane. And let's meet in the middle, and let's do what we can to help the survivors here.
Guam's governor, Carl Gutierrez, sees Rika Matsuda all alone and crying out for her mother.
Don't cry, little angel. Everything will be okay.
I did not dare let her go. It's something that I almost like there was a bond between me and that little girl. And I found out later she was 11, but she looked really smaller than 11 years old.
Fire Chief Chuck Sanchez finds Barry Small in the swordgrass.
Take my jacket.
He gave me his fire jacket and put under my head to comfort me.
Here, go. All right, let's go.
Later on, he was very distressed that he had to come back and get it back because he was getting burnt, dragging people and bodies out of the aircraft.
We were cutting trees to use for splint. We were taking off our protective gears to cover the survivors.
It's clear to rescue personnel that for many, they've arrived too late. But Sanchez isn't giving up. He sends a team to search further into the wreckage.
Group 2, start at the tail and work forward. Go.
All I heard was this large explosion, man, right where they were at. And I go, did we lose our people?
A Boeing 747 has crashed on a rugged hillside in Guam, just a few miles short of the airport. There were 254 people on board. Rescue workers comb through the wreckage when an explosion rips through the remains of the plane.
No radio transmission at all. We lost all transmission, and then finally somebody came out. Sir, we're okay. We survived the explosion. Everybody's accounted for.
It's not until the dawn finally comes that rescue workers can see the extent of the damage. The plane has spilled down the mountain and broken into several large pieces. Only 26 people survived the disaster. Friends and family are desperate for any news. Many bodies are badly burned. Although most of the passengers are Korean, Sean Burke and his girlfriend Wendy Bunton are among a few Americans on the flight. Thousands of kilometers away, news of the crash reaches Sean's parents. When she hears about the crash, Sean Burke's stepmother doesn't know if Sean is alive or dead.
He could have been burned in the crash. He could be unconscious in a local hospital there, and we just wanted to go over and bring him back. So, I mean, because that kept going through our mind that he possibly could be laying on the hillside.
Since Guam is an American territory, the responsibility for investigating the crash falls to the National Transportation Safety Board. Greg Feith is the lead investigator. When he arrives on the site, he has to contend with more than just the carnage of the plane crash. Grieving family members surround the scene, making it especially difficult for investigators to work.
As an accident investigator, you have to keep your emotions in check. It's like being a doctor in an ER room. You see this devastation, you see this tragedy unfolding in front of you. You hear about all of the sad stories, especially when there are kids and innocent people involved. And as an accident investigator, you have to keep those emotions in check because you have to remain objective, you have to remain emotionless to be able to do your job effectively.
And we had a whole building full of people just like us. They were all grieving and crying out. It was just horrible.
One of the first things we did was we went out on site and we did what we call a site survey. We had to really get an understanding of what we were dealing with as far as the wreckage and how we were going to conduct the on-scene investigation.
During the preliminary investigation, Feith finds that large sections of the plane are almost completely intact.
The airplane landed relatively under control. That is, that the pilot basically landed the airplane into the trees and into that terrain. Unfortunately, it was 3 miles from the airport.
Investigators find a number of items that survived the crash and the fire that followed, including the landing chart the crew was using as it approached Guam Airport. Investigators also find Captain Park's travel bag, and in it discover a small plastic pill container. Captain Park had been prescribed a variety of drugs, including pills containing benzodiazepine, a class of drugs often used as a sedative. The pills and tissue samples from Captain Park's remains are sent for analysis. The landing chart becomes part of a growing pile of evidence. Using information from the jet's flight data recorder, investigators recreate the plane's flight path. The relatively gentle slope of its descent supports Feith's belief that the jet all but landed on the hillside. But the flight path shouldn't look like this.
Korean Air 801 cleared for ILS runway 6 left approach. Glide slope unusable.
Korean 801, roger, clear for ILS runway 6 left.
The crew had been told that the glide slope at the airport wasn't working. It meant that the captain had to take more manual control of his plane.
It's now up to the pilot to fly an established procedure called a step down, where he starts at an altitude of, say, 2,000 feet. When he gets to a particular point located by what they call DME, or distance measuring equipment, he then starts a descent to another prescribed altitude.
If the crew was following the step down procedure, Its flight path would resemble a set of stairs. But after the first step, the plane enters a long, slow descent.
If you don't hit those step downs, and those altitudes are prescribed to give you terrain clearance, if you don't fly that, as depicted on the approach chart, you run the risk of flying into an obstruction or high terrain.
The plane's cockpit voice recorder has also been recovered from the debris. Fyfe and his team begin to analyze it, hoping to better understand what happened in the cockpit.
Set 560 feet.
On 2 separate occasions, Captain Park gave orders to descend long before he was supposed to. But there are other clues on the tape as well.
The cockpit voice recorder provided us, the investigators, quite a bit of information. But one of the key elements that we found was that the flight crew appeared to be tired.
Really sleepy.
This was a chartered flight, so it would have put them on what we call backside of the clock flying. That is, they wouldn't be normally flying during the day, they are now flying at night. And typically your body says you should be asleep when it's dark outside.
The sedatives could have made a difficult situation even worse. But when the lab results come back, they're conclusive. While he had the pills with him, there are no traces of them in Captain Park's system. When lead investigator Greg Fyfe returns to the cockpit voice recorder, he focuses on the captain's discussion of the glide slope.
Is the glide slope working? The glide slope, yeah?
Yes. Yes, it's working. Why is it working?
He started to see the glide slope needle move a little bit and started to question the other crew members as to whether or not the glide slope was actually working or not.
It's early in the morning. After a long flight, Captain Park is tired, perhaps confused and distracted by the unexpected readings on his glide slope.
It became very apparent listening to the cockpit voice recorder that in fact he got fixated.
But Fyfe still doesn't understand why Park's glide slope appeared to be working. Was there a problem on this plane? Or is the equipment susceptible to problems that could affect other jets as well? To find out, he brings in navigation expert Nelson Spornheimer.
I spent some time looking at the transcript, trying to determine what the navigation issues were, why a good airplane was in the wrong place, and to investigate the apparent confusion on the part of the crew who thought that the glide slope was working at least part of the time.
Spornheimer sends a team of investigators to Guam. They fly over the island, trying to determine whether radio signals from a nearby military base could have acted on the plane, making it seem like the glide slope was working.
Glide slope receivers can respond to non-glide slope signals, particularly when the intended glide slope signal is absent. If there are spurious signals on the channel and they contain the right information, they can cause intermittent movements of the glide slope needle.
Set 560 feet.
But the signals wouldn't be sustained. Like a light switch turning quickly on and off, the glide slope indicator would give periodic indications that it was working, but not for long.
My conclusion was that spurious signals, whether they be from other transmitters or failed ground equipment such as personal walkie-talkies, could not cause a sustained warning flag movement.
If the glide slope wasn't fully operating, why did Park believe it was? And even if he did believe it was working, why did he crash into Nimitz Hill?
Isn't the glide slope working? Wiper on.
As investigators continue to try to piece together the causes of the crash, Barry Small is trying to understand why he and 25 others survived.
I went to touch my shoes, we hit the ground, and I was accidentally in the perfect crash position by some sort of miracle.
An airline engineering apprentice and helicopter pilot, Small understands airplanes.
I do firmly believe there are some changes that could be made to aircraft.
Small believes that the way crossbars are built into aircraft seats caused one of his legs to break. but luck saved his other leg.
My right leg went forward and crashed into the bar in front of the seat and broke. My left leg was saved by my carry bag stopping my leg going forward to hit that bar.
Still able to walk on his one good leg, Small escapes while others remain trapped inside. Since she's young, Rika Matsuda's legs are shorter than a normal adult. Sitting normally, her legs wouldn't have been pressed against the crossbar on impact, so she was able to escape the plane.
Go now, get out of here.
While her mother died. Small is also convinced that the flames that first spread through the cabin of Korean Air Flight 801 were preventable.
They estimate that those top lockers had over 462 litres of burnable alcohol on board. Had the plane been full, there could be at least twice that amount.
During the crash, Small believes that the duty-free alcohol mixed with oxygen in the plane's ceiling. The combination ignited with deadly results. It's a fire he thinks could have been prevented.
Why have this risk, alcohol and oxygen? I thought, you know, for aircraft's about safety, and this is just a blatant breaking of the rules of safety as far as I'm concerned.
As he continues to recover from the accident, Small is determined to prevent what had happened to him from happening to others. He decides to push for changes on how seats are made and how duty-free alcohol is stored. For NTSB investigator Greg Feith, the biggest question still remains. How did an experienced pilot, one recently honored by his company for his safety record, crash his plane 5 kilometers short of the airport? As the investigation continues, he discovers that the landing chart the crew was using was more than 6 months old and out of date. It's an indication that the crew could have been better prepared for the landing. When he reviews the training practices for Korean Airlines, Feith uncovers more gaps in the information that the crew received.
We found that the Korean Airlines flight crew had all of their training based on airports with approaches where the DME was always co-located at the airport.
DME is distance measuring equipment, electronic beacons that tell pilots where they are in relation to the airport. Often the final beacon is found at the foot of the runway. That was not the case in Guam. The airport was in fact 5 kilometers further on. Struggling to see through the rain, Park was unable to find the airport. Distracted by the unexpected glide slope readings, Park used the final beacon as a guide, expecting it to take him right to the runway.
Let's make a missed approach. Not inside. Not inside. Missed approach. Go round. Go round. Flaps.
It's clear that Flight 801 flew an approach about 3 miles premature. In other words, the descent was about 3 miles early. It was a nominal approach otherwise, just to the wrong location.
We think that based on fatigue and some of their training, that in fact, when the flight crew crashed the airplane, when the counter got to 0, they thought the airport should be there.
A fully loaded 747 weighs more than 200,000 kilograms. Like an enormous ocean liner, it can't change course quickly. Blinded by rain and relying on their equipment, the crew of Korean Air Flight 801 thought they were heading straight at the runway. When they realized something was wrong, it was too late. As the investigation continues, Feith and his team make a startling discovery. Equipment that would have given the crew more time to react had been disabled on purpose. In August of 1997, the crash of Korean Air Flight 801 took the lives of more than 200 people. The final accident investigation report is published more than 2 years after the crash. It lays blame on the Korean Airlines training methods and the crew's over-reliance on the jet's automation. But it also has sharp words reserved for the FAA, the body that regulates air travel in the United States. Because of an FAA decision, a critical piece of technology that could have saved Flight 801 was intentionally disabled. The Minimum Safe Altitude Warning System, or MSAW, is a standard piece of equipment at major American airports. But in Guam, the FAA had made a critical alteration to the way it was used.
Contact the Aganya Tower.
MSAW uses radar to watch the planes as they come into the airport. If they're too low, a warning is given to air traffic controllers, who can then relay it to the crew. But in Guam, the system kept giving nuisance readings to controllers.
The controllers kept getting these nuisance warnings. They redesigned the software and moved the limitations of the MSAW further away from the airport, where it afforded no one a level of protection.
Instead of watching the planes as they neared the airport, the system in Guam now tracked them when they were more than 80 kilometers away, over the ocean.
I think the best way to describe that would have been, and should be, irresponsible. Because you've taken this system that was designed as a level of protection, not only for the controller, but you've taken the protection away from the flying public.
For the passengers and crew of Flight 801, the lack of the MSAW system sealed their fate. If the system had been working, the crash could have been avoided. Without it, the crew had no warning at all.
The two pilots didn't want to die. They had families. No one wanted to die. We still do not blame them. The bottom line is nobody wanted to be in that situation. It was just something that happened.
For Barry Small, the years since the crash of Flight 801 have been emotional and frustrating. The Civil Aviation Authority in his homeland of New Zealand has acknowledged the potential danger posed by duty-free liquor on board, but so far no policies have been changed. His desire to modify airplane seat design has also been ignored.
I have taken several steps to put this idea forward, and in a lot of cases it's initially met with enthusiasm, but it eventually ends up in the too hard basket. And when I try to approach seat design people, no one wants to hear about it.
Sean Burke was never officially identified as a victim of Flight 801. Wendy Bunton was positively identified, but DNA samples only proved that a white male was on the plane near her.
Bill and I never gave up hope that Sean had survived the crash. Even after we came home for, I would say, a year or two, every time the phone rang, every time somebody knocked on the door, we expected a phone message saying, "Hi, Dad, this is your son, Sean."
Eventually, several years after the crash, Barry Small was able to give Kathy Burke and her husband some sense of finality and an enduring image of their son.
When we met him, and he wanted to tell us that in the 12-hour layover in Seoul, he was wandering around and finally heard two people speaking English. And he said they were so much in love that he did not want to interrupt their conversation.
For Sean's father, the deep sorrow of the crash will never completely leave.
For me, the grief of Sean's loss never ends. Hasn't gotten better, hasn't got worse. Just another day. For everybody else, it's gone. You know, I expect people to move on, but I'll be this way till the day I'm with him again.
For Barry Small, there is anger too, but also incredible gratitude for surviving.
So many people have told me that I survived for a reason. And I've been searching for that reason for 9 years now. And I truly believe if someone would listen to my story about the oxygen and alcohol and the improvement of the seats, that I could justify in my own mind that I don't have to feel guilty about surviving.
For investigators trying to solve a plane crash, the most important tool can be the black box. It records every detail in the cockpit.
Look at this. Where's Charlie at?
And tells investigators about vital conversations.
Damn, it's starting to rain.
Northwest 255, runway 3 center, clear for takeoff.
But in the crash of Northwest Airlines Flight 255...
I have never been to an accident of that scale.
It wasn't what investigators heard on the tape.
TCI was on set.
It was what they didn't hear.
It's checked.
That would lead to an astonishing conclusion. Detroit, Michigan, August the 16th, 1987. It's 8 p.m. and the city is sweltering. 25 kilometers from downtown, Detroit Metropolitan Airport is one of the busiest airports in the United States. More than 1,100 airplanes use its 4 runways each day. Today, one of those is Northwest Airlines Flight 255, bound for Phoenix, Arizona. Captain John Mouse is in command. A Las Vegas native, 57-year-old Mouse is a veteran pilot. His first officer is 35-year-old David Dodds of Galena, Illinois.
Why don't you tell them we're ready to go?
Both have years of experience on this type of aircraft. The MD-80 is also known as the Super 80 and is the second generation of the DC-9.
The MD-80 was quite a bit longer. It had more powerful engines, so it could carry more people. For that reason, it was a better moneymaker for the airlines than the DC-9 was.
Look at this.
The sky between Detroit and Phoenix is filled with storms. Several are moving quickly towards the airport.
There's a line here.
For the crew, it's been a long day.
They're about 25 miles wide. Well, if we get out of here pretty quick, we won't have a delay.
They've already flown from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Saginaw, Michigan, and then Detroit. Phoenix is their next stop on the way to Santa Ana, California.
If we wait till after the storm's here, there'll be delays going over Waterville.
If they're delayed by weather, they may not make their final destination.
Let's get out of here before it starts raining.
The plane's 149 passengers are also eager to leave. Paula Sheehan and her family have been visiting relatives. They're heading home to Arizona. Her daughter Cecilia is only 4 years old.
Looks like bags are all in.
Why don't you tell them we're ready to go?
Ram 255 and Delta 50.
Flight 255 is running half an hour late.
Northwest 255, cleared to go.
Okay, we're cleared to push.
Let's do the checklist.
Brakes.
Set.
Windshield heat. It's on. Boost pumps. Unit 6. Cabin pressure controller. Checked. Auxiliary hydraulic pumps and pressure. On and checked.
Yeah. It's starting to rain.
To beat the storms, they need to leave immediately.
Sign beacons. Go on. Before start checklist is complete.
Flight 255 begins moving from the gate to the runway.
Northwest 255.
But because of the weather...
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie runway 3 center.
The ground controller gives them a last-minute runway change.
Okay, out to Charlie for 3 center, Northwest 255. Charlie for 3 center right.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently number 1 for departure. We should be rolling in a couple minutes. Let attendants be seated. Thank you.
Blacker than hell out there.
Where's Charlie at?
By the time they get to the new runway, they're 45 minutes behind schedule.
Northwest 255, runway 3 center, clear for takeoff.
Within 17 seconds, 65,000 kilograms of passengers and aircraft hurtle down runway 3C. But moments before liftoff, Mouse discovers he can't engage the auto throttle.
Let's stay on. TCI's on set.
His computer isn't in takeoff mode.
They're on now.
Okay.
Clamp. 100 knots.
At 313 kilometers per hour.
V1. Rotate.
The pilots angle the plane's nose up for liftoff. Then something else goes wrong. Just under 50 feet from the ground, the aircraft begins rolling from side to side.
Tower, lifeguard copter 102.
It rolls left and strikes a light pole. Out of control, Flight 255 slams into the ground, skids along a highway, and disintegrates when it hits an overpass.
I prayed that everybody made it, but I thought it was just a small plane because it happened so quickly. I didn't know it was a bigger plane, and it was just awful.
I saw the plane come through the viaducts, a big fireball.
Well, we got dispatched. It was a rainy Sunday night. And then he said there was an airliner down, and our mood kind of just changed. And the one guy looked at me, Dan, and said, well, I hope it's a small one. When we pulled up, we saw the cockpit and the word West written on the fuselage, and we looked at each other, and he said, it looks like a big one.
There's a trail of scorched bodies and debris more than a kilometer long. Just minutes after impact, paramedic Tim Schroeder is on the scene looking for survivors.
I've never been to an accident of that scale. We were struck by the magnitude of what we were seeing, the large scale of it. It was almost overwhelming.
From the little that's left of Flight 255, it is unlikely they'll find anyone alive.
And I buddied up with Dan, and we both started entering the wreckage. It was probably a minute went by, and Dan actually heard a noise. He asked me a couple times, you know, do I hear anything? And I said no. And then finally I heard it, and it was more like a faint cry. When I turned my head to the right, I saw an arm underneath the seat.
1, 2, 3, lift!
She was covered in some blood and some soot.
Somehow, 4-year-old Cecilia Sheehan has survived the crash. But she's badly injured. Tim Schroeder races her to hospital.
We have a 4-year-old girl found alive in the wreckage. She has a very weak pulse.
If Cecilia survived, perhaps others have as well. Rescuers spend hours looking through the wreckage for more survivors, but their efforts will be in vain.
We actually covered anything that was a body or a body part with a yellow blanket. It was just nothing but like a sea of yellow blankets, basically.
Northwest Airlines said 154 passengers and crew aboard the plane died in the crash.
Both Captain Mouse and First Officer Dodds are killed in the crash. 2 other people died when their cars were hit by the plane. This is the second deadliest airplane disaster in US history. Recovering in hospital with serious head wounds is Flight 255's lone survivor, 4-year-old Cecilia Sheehan. Despite her injuries, doctors say she will live.
Maybe God was on her side that night.
Within hours of the crash, investigator Jack Drake and his team from the National Transportation Safety Board begin looking for clues. Drake is a former Navy pilot who's been involved in hundreds of crash investigations.
You know when you're at a crash site because you get this combination of burned plastic and kerosene, and sometimes combined with fire retardant foam that has its own distinctive odor. You know you've arrived when you smell it.
Drake and his team treat the crash site like a crime scene.
Our team consisted of 12 or 13 specialists, some of whom go to the site and some of whom do their work elsewhere.
They set out to examine every piece of wreckage to discover what went wrong.
They have responsibilities for looking at different parts of the wreckage debris and do qualitative analysis of those parts. We always look for the recorders first. They're frequently referred to as black boxes, although they're usually orange. The information is usually well protected because they're encased in a steel box that is both heat resistant and crash resistant.
Since the 1960s, commercial jetliners have been required to carry flight data and voice recorders. The CVR was first introduced in Australia following the 1960 crash of a Fokker F-27. The devices must be able to withstand an impact of 3,400 Gs and temperatures as high as 1,100 degrees Celsius. The cockpit voice recorder is intact, but the flight data recorder suffered some damage in the crash. They may hold the only clues that can help solve this accident. Both recorders are sent to the NTSB lab in Washington, D.C. John Clark is Drake's flight performance engineer. His first task is to make a map of the debris left behind by Flight 255.
When I first started seeing the wreckage, your mind immediately starts turning to sorting out where it hit, how it hit, not where the wreckage ended up, but those first few inches where the airplane was coming down.
Clark looks for ground scars and other impact marks, and interviews witnesses to piece together where the plane fell and how.
And that kind of gives you a sense of those last moments, what the airplane was doing when it hit the ground.
Clark begins to understand the final moments of Flight 255. According to witnesses, as it lifted off, it couldn't climb and flew in a nose-high position.
B1, rotate.
That could indicate that the plane didn't have enough power to get off the ground, that it didn't have enough speed, or that high winds prevented it from lifting off. Witnesses provide investigators with a critical clue.
You saw fire coming from the engine.
Several, including an air traffic controller, saw flames coming from the plane's engine before the crash.
Damn!
The engines become the first focus of this investigation.
They look for evidence of an internal failure.
The plane suffered an engine failure.
Investigators soon learned that less than a month earlier, one of the plane's engines was damaged when it was hit by a foreign object. It was repaired and was being monitored by mechanics to see how it performed. The team studies the remains of the engine for clues that it had either caught fire or shut down on takeoff. Despite what the witnesses saw, they find no evidence of fire or of a massive breakdown.
The information suggested that the engine operation had been normal.
Plan, 100 knots.
The flames were the result of the fuel tank rupturing after the plane hit a light pole. The fire didn't cause the crash. If Drake and his team are to solve this mystery, they need to be certain about what happened in the last few seconds before Flight 255 crashed.
Well, I think probably the best physical evidence is what was on the flight data recorder. The flight data recorder doesn't tell you about weather, it tells you about aircraft parameters, aircraft performance essentially second by second, even at quarter-second intervals in some parameters.
But NTSB technicians can't recover all the information from the recorder. They send it to the manufacturer to see if they can recover the lost data. While he waits for news about the flight data recorder, Jack Drake looks more closely at the weather on the night of the crash.
There was some convective or thundershower type activity that had moved through the area, and its impact on the accident required a lot of analysis.
Drake wonders how the storm affected Flight 255. He listens to the cockpit voice recorder for clues. He discovers the menacing weather was a concern to the crew.
Let's get out of here before it starts raining. Jesus, look at this.
Drake sees that there were several storms along the flight path, and they were getting closer to Detroit.
There's a line here, and a line between these two. And another one here about 25 miles wide.
Thunderstorms can create a very dangerous threat to pilots.
Since there was severe weather in the area, we always worry about microbursts.
Microbursts occur when columns of air shoot down to Earth. As a plane passes through, winds batter it from all directions, making it difficult to control.
In a microburst condition, you can get very shifting winds and also vertical winds that try to push the airplane into the ground. So you can get loss of airspeed, a very rapid rise in airspeed, and then also actually push the airplane toward the ground. And it requires very aggressive flying on the part of the flight crew.
This unusual weather condition had killed before. In 1985, a microburst brought down a Delta Airlines flight in Dallas, killing 137 people. At the time of the Detroit accident, there was no device at airports to accurately detect microbursts. Instead, pilots relied on reports from other crews. Jack Drake discovers that 27 minutes before liftoff, Captain Mouse and First Officer Dodds received such a warning.
Ground, this is 722. You just had a microburst out here. The dust just exploded down there.
Investigators suspect that a microburst may have slammed Flight 255 to the ground as it tried to lift off.
It was right after departure when the accident occurred. If they had struck a very strong microburst, that would be a candidate for one of the possible causes.
Satellite images taken at the time of the crash and weather data from the airport's sensors show that there were storms near the airport at the time of the accident. But there's no evidence of a microburst.
Wind and rain, but nothing that could be a microburst.
Around the time of the crash, the airport's sensors did record a dangerous gust of wind on the runway, powerful enough to set off alarms in the tower. Upon further investigation, Drake discovers that Flight 255 was still at the gate at the time of that alarm. So the winds couldn't have brought the plane down.
Sign beacons.
But they did have a huge effect on Captain Mouse's flight plan. The crew's pre-flight dispatch package stated that they would take off from runway 21 left. But with the sudden change of wind direction, ground control sends Flight 255 to runway 3C, the shortest of 3 available runways.
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie runway 3 center.
Okay, out to Charlie for 3 center, Northwest 255. Charlie for 3 center right.
Okay.
Controllers try to have planes take off into the wind. The additional wind flowing over a plane's wings gives it more lift and helps it get off the ground. Taking off into the wind is safer, but taking off on the shorter runway now means First Officer Dodds must recalculate the plane's takeoff weight.
There's a runway change. You have to determine if the weight of the aircraft will permit it to accelerate and climb out safely. And this varies depending on the length of the runway, temperature, altitude of the airport.
Perhaps First Officer Dodds made a mistake in his calculation.
44.4. How can we be that light for a full airplane?
If he did, it could explain why the MD-80 wasn't able to make it off the ground. Runway 3C simply wasn't long enough. Using calculations based on average weight of luggage and passengers on board, Drake's team confirmed Dodd's estimate. The plane weighed 144,047 pounds, well below the allowable limit for runway 3C. It should have been able to get off the ground. Drake's investigation has hit another dead end. He and his team are running out of possibilities. Until technicians can decode the damaged flight data recorder, the team must rely on the physical evidence that's been found at the crash site. But when investigators study the cockpit's center console, they're forced to consider an almost unimaginable cause.
Is this the way it was found?
To get the plane off the ground, the flaps on the wings should have been extended to the 11-degree position. But the way the flap handle is damaged suggests the plane's flaps were retracted when it crashed.
The pin had left a mark. This happens because the aircraft comes to a very sudden stop and the handle jangles around, and it's a metal-to-metal contact that's exaggerated by the impact.
Well, stay on.
That indicator was that the flaps were zero or fully retracted, and the slats were retracted as well.
Flaps and slats are extensions that slide out of the back and front of the wing. They make the wing bigger, which increases the amount of lift they can provide. They must be extended for takeoff.
If the slats are retracted, and for the most part, with today's modern jets, the airplane is not capable of flight. It's not capable of flight.
If the crew tried to take off with the flaps retracted, it would be an astonishing blunder.
B1, rotate.
But a pilot who was lined up directly behind Flight 255 on the runway is certain the plane's flaps were extended.
And you're sure the flaps were extended?
Pilots in other aircraft that were close to the point where the takeoff had begun were telling us that they thought the flaps and slats were deployed to a normal position.
Investigators can't be sure whether the flaps were extended or not. The clues they need lie somewhere in the sea of debris recovered from the crash site. Eventually, investigators find the evidence they need inside a section of the plane's left wing.
Each component of the slat system has its own drive system, and one of those was interrupted by the light pole that passed through the wing. 18 feet of the left wing was severed.
The cable controlling the slats was sliced in two when the wing hit the light pole. Based on where the cable was cut, investigators can tell whether the slats and flaps were extended or retracted.
It severed two cables, and if you lined up those two severed ends, it corresponded with the slats being in the full retracted position.
It looks increasingly likely that the crew never extended their flaps. Only the damaged flight data recorder can verify this. Fortunately, technicians have finally been able to rescue all its data. A digital history of Flight 255's performance until the moment of impact.
I knew that if we had a good recorder, we were going to get data back. The flight data recorders in combination give you that time history that goes together with the physical evidence or physical damage.
As expected, the FDR confirms what the evidence has been showing investigators.
Flight data recorders told us that the flaps and slats had not been extended.
It's a major breakthrough. Drake now knows what brought down Flight 255. But the flight data recorder doesn't answer a more troubling question.
So, why weren't the flaps deployed?
For some reason, a seasoned crew forgot one of the most basic steps involved in getting an airplane off the ground. Two months after the crash, Northwest Airlines Flight 255's sole survivor, Cecilia Sheehan, is released from hospital.
We can't be sure why the little girl survived. She's a very little girl buckled into a big seat, and she was more protected than adults that might have been sitting around her. But she was very lucky.
Jack Drake needs to know what contributed to the death of her family and all the other victims. he finds an important clue on the cockpit voice recorder. It shows that the last-minute runway change caused confusion in the cockpit.
Once the aircraft began to taxi,
blacker than hell out there.
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie runway 3 center.
other activities were introduced that had the potential to cause distractions.
Did he say 3 center?
3 center, yeah. That's why I was thinking we had to go that way.
I was thinking 2-1.
Well, they made a wrong turn, which might have been confusing because they had to go a different route.
Where's Charlie at?
Right at the end of this ramp.
I think Charlie was...
No, it is Charlie.
Sure?
I think so.
The crew got lost on the way to runway 3C.
Ground, Northwest 255. I guess we went by Charlie. We're going to 3 center right.
Northwest 255, affirmative. Make a left turn at Foxtrot.
They finally got to the runway 45 minutes late.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently number 1 for departure. Should be rolling in a couple of minutes. Flight attendants be seated, thank you.
But Jack Drake finds something missing on the CVR. It seems the crew overlooked a very important step.
We're okay for the center runway, aren't we?
Before they got lost, the crew of Flight 255 performed a number of checklists, but possibly due to the confusion of the runway change, they seem to have completely neglected the taxi checklist.
They apparently didn't consider the checklist, and key in the checklist is the configuration of the aircraft for departure, and the flight data recorder showed that was never done.
There are hundreds of small steps for a crew to take to get a passenger jet off the ground. Most of them are covered by checklists.
The checklist is a means by which you ensure that important items are positioned or done properly.
Transponder.
Instead of doing it by memory and having the possibility of a lapse of memory.
Brakes.
Flight crews use a very rigorous and regimented procedure of following the checklist. Verify that each switch, each dial, each lever is in the proper position before taking the runway for departure.
The first item on the taxi checklist is flaps.
One of the things that would have been included in their checklist was to configure the slats and flaps for low-speed flight.
But because they didn't run the checklist, the crew never set their flaps to the takeoff position.
I think Charlie was...
No, it is Charlie.
You sure?
I think so.
They hadn't done this checklist at the time they normally would, and as the activities piled up that were potential distractions, they were further and further away from the point at which they would normally perform that function. Their mindset was probably that they had completed it.
The pilots got an indication that their plane wasn't properly configured. During takeoff, they couldn't activate the auto throttle because their computer wasn't in takeoff mode. Another step covered by the taxi checklist.
Won't stay on. TCI's on set.
This should have alerted them that they didn't perform the checklist.
If it had occurred to them at that point that we might have missed something else on the checklist, that could have led to a rejected takeoff.
They're on now. 100 knots.
Okay.
Apparently that didn't happen, and so the takeoff was continued.
With disastrous results. An alarm should have sounded when the pilots tried to take off with their flaps retracted. But for some reason, investigators can't hear it on the cockpit voice recorder.
When it activates, it alerts the crew that the aircraft is not in a configuration that's safe for takeoff.
Maybe it went off, but we just can't hear it.
The investigation team is determined to find out why the takeoff warning didn't sound. Technicians analyze the cockpit voice recorder for more clues, and they find something unusual.
They picked up some enunciations on the CVR that were not correct.
Stall. Stall.
This warning is alerting the crew that the plane is about to stall. But it should be coming from 2 speakers in the cockpit.
Stall.
Technicians notice it's only coming from 1.
Stall. Stall.
As the airplane lifted off, there was a stall warning, and it has a typical characteristic of a sound like stall all, because there are 2 enunciations, and the purpose of that is to provide redundancy. But that redundancy wasn't there. We had a single stall. I went to an MD-80 sitting on the ramp at Detroit, and a captain took us through the process of checking out to demonstrate those different sounds.
Let's start with the config warning.
The takeoff configuration warning is what would have alerted them about the flaps and slats.
Flaps. Slats. Flaps.
Can we get the stall warning to sound?
Stall all. Stall all.
He activated the stall warning system by a test switch, and it said stall all.
The voice on the left channel is slightly different from the voice on the right, as it should be. But that's not what Clark heard on Flight 255's voice recorder.
Can you make it sound like this?
Stall. Stall.
To get a singular stall, he had to pull power to one side or the other. And one way he demonstrated that is he pulled the P40 circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker is the electrical switch that protects the circuit from damage caused by overload. The P40 circuit breaker is an important one in this investigation. It handled both the failed takeoff warning and the stall warning systems.
What struck me was, he said, I hear people doing it. I, of course, don't do it myself, but let me show you how. And he reached around behind him, around behind the seat and down low and pulled the P40 circuit breaker without looking. And then when he ran the stall warning system, we got the singular stall.
Stall. Stall.
It's a major clue. Clark could only reproduce the strange-sounding stall warning by pulling the same circuit breaker that's connected to the takeoff warning. This tells investigators that the breaker was tripped when Flight 255 tried to take off. Then John Clark notices something else about the P40 circuit breaker.
You could see smudge marks around the decals on each side of the circuit breaker. It looked like finger marks where oil had built up and dirt and grime over the years. So it told me that that circuit breaker was being used routinely by a lot of pilots.
Can you tell me why that is so worn?
It turned out that the takeoff configuration warning could be a nuisance to pilots.
If you're doing a single engine taxi, you have to push the throttle up further to get a power to taxi, and you would set off the takeoff warning system. And so they would pull the circuit breaker to silence it. It's irritating. It's a warning. It's meant to alert you. And if it's going off routinely all the time, it gets on their nerves. And so apparently pilots were routinely silencing those takeoff warnings.
Investigators suspect that the crew of Flight 255 tripped the breaker to avoid the irritating takeoff warning. And then, with the added delay from the runway change and the impending storm, they proceeded to take off without doing the taxi checklist. That might explain why the alarm didn't sound when they tried to take off with their flaps retracted.
We don't know if the pilot did pull that circuit breaker on that particular flight. There was certainly one error and the potential for two, I think that the extensive use of the circuit breaker because of the smudge marks around the circuit breaker and the pilot statements, I think it's highly likely that he did.
It appears the downing of Flight 255 was caused by pilot error. Now investigators can accurately piece together what happened that night in Detroit. But it would take another shocking accident for the airline industry to learn its lesson. Jack Drake's team has discovered what caused the crash of Flight 255, but cannot prevent it from happening again. 1 year later in Dallas, Delta Flight 1141 tried to take off without their flaps extended. The investigators who had been working on the Northwest crash are stunned.
I was very frustrated to learn that another airline had done the same thing in a different aircraft type about a year later.
The Delta crash would uncover potentially deadly flaws
Before start checklist, battery.
in the checklists commercial pilots are trained to follow. The Delta and Northwest crashes killed 170 people and had eerily similar causes. In both disasters, the workload in the cockpit increased.
Jesus, look at this.
Northwest 255, now exited Charlie runway 3.
If we get out of here pretty quick, we won't have a delay. Auto land.
And in both, the pilots failed to perform vital elements of their checklists.
It is very unusual for a crew to not perform a checklist. They have done it hundreds upon hundreds of times.
Brakes, windshield heat is on, cabin pressure controller is checked.
The normal procedures were a little bit out of the norm, and as a result, it got overlooked.
To prevent this from happening again, aviation officials turned to a government agency that knows the importance of clear procedures.
4, 3, 2, 1.
NASA.
So they're in there, ready to go. All right.
Jack Drake and his team wanted the US Space Agency to help create checklists that decrease the odds of items being skipped. Asaf Degani was a research scientist working with NASA. After the accident, he took on the project of improving a flight crew's pre-takeoff procedure.
We looked for any research that was done on checklists or procedures in general, and in fact, we couldn't find anything.
So Degani had to start from scratch. But there are dozens of different checklists to examine. Most of the ones on Flight 255 were printed on a single card. They listed the tasks the crew had to carry out, but didn't give them a way to keep track of what was and what wasn't done. At the time of the Northwest crash, there were several types of mechanical checklists in use. The US Air Force used a scrolling checklist. Once a checklist item is completed, the pilot scrolls to the next one. American Airlines used a system that allowed pilots to cover up completed items with a plastic slide, so only the non-completed items would be displayed. Asaf Degani set out to see firsthand how pilots were using checklists. He wanted to make it less likely for them to make mistakes. He sat in cockpits and observed 42 different crews in action. Degani concluded that many checklists were badly designed.
There's a certain flow by which you go about checking things, and the idea is to prevent a case where you're doing one thing here, one thing there. Checklist should have a certain flow, which is a logical flow, and not one which is kind of random. And they're ready, and they're going through there.
Degani also found a much more serious problem with checklists. If pilots are interrupted, they sometimes forget where they left off.
Transponder. Checked and on.
And there's many cases where people would do A, B, C, D, E, an air traffic call would come, they'd have to respond to it, and that's an interrupt.
Northwest 255, now exited Charlie runway 3 center.
They will go back to the checklist and skip a certain item and continue on the list, assuming that the whole list was done. People were very concerned about that.
To ensure no steps are missed, airlines train their pilots to return to the top of a checklist following the interruption and start over. Again, Asaf Degani sees a problem.
And we found that if checklists are very, very long and meticulous, that's overburdening the crew, and they sometimes would not want to start again from the beginning.
To address the problem, Degani suggests changes across the airline industry.
One of our recommendations from the study is to try to take long checklists and chunk them to small pieces so that if an interruption happens, then doing another 4 or 5 items, it's not a big effort as opposed to doing 20.
Degani even made recommendations about the typeface that airlines use, so they can be more easily read by pilots. Perhaps the biggest advance to checklists is the move from paper to computers.
Since at the time computer technology was coming into the cockpit, it made a lot of sense to think about the electronic checklist.
Today, Degani and his team are studying smart checklists that keep track of checked items. They provide pilots with a visual indication of where they are on the list, and in some cases verify that the task has been correctly carried out.
Electronic checklist shows you which item was completed and which item was not.
Computerized checklists are now slowly making their way into the cockpits of commercial airplanes. They make it far less likely that an accident like Northwest 255 could happen again. The FAA also ordered a modification to the alarm system of all commercial jetliners to prevent nuisance alarms. The takeoff warning was redesigned, so it could not sound unless the plane was actually taking off. Jack Drake went on to investigate hundreds of accidents over a 26-year career with the NTSB. The crash of Flight 255 taught him a valuable lesson.
This one is a worldwide example of the importance of following checklists and configuration being completed correctly on every takeoff. And so it became something that was a part of the training curriculum in virtually every airline around the world.
The case of Northwest 255 is no different. It's a series of events, runway change, task saturation, an overlooked checklist, a failed takeoff warning system. Put all of those together, those links in a chain, and you end up with the accident. If you were to break any one of those links, the accident wouldn't have happened.
Flight 255 will also be remembered for its lone survivor, Cecilia Sheehan. She's never spoken publicly about the death of her family. But she's stayed in touch with the people who rescued her that day.
She's full of life, and the conversations we have, it's more about, her sports and her husband and her vacations. She just said maybe one day she'll come out and tell the world what Cecilia is doing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain. I hope you had a good...
Captain Stefan Rasmussen has been in love with flying all of his life.
I got my first idea of flying when I was a young boy.
After learning to fly in the Air Force, Rasmussen joined Scandinavian Airlines.
He seemed to be the one who really enjoyed his job.
On December the 27th, 1991, he's in command of a state-of-the-art DC-9. The flight will take him to the very edge of his abilities, as his engines fail and his plane falls out of the sky.
I was in a nightmare.
Stockholm, Scandinavian 751. We are crashing into the ground now.
What caused the most baffling accident in Sweden's history is nothing investigators could have imagined. What they finally uncover will strain Rasmussen's lifelong relationship with airplanes to the breaking point.
I really felt that I didn't trust the aircraft.
Mayday, Mayday.
It's 2 days after Christmas. Stockholm Arlanda Airport is a mess of snow, slush, and ice. Passengers boarding a mid-morning Scandinavian Airlines flight to Copenhagen are finding the cabin very uncomfortable.
It was really warm inside the plane when we entered because there had been like heaters on during night. And I saw when the passengers embarked, they also wanted to take off like jackets and shoes, and because it was like a sauna.
Is it possible to turn the heat down now?
"34-year-old Ulf Sedermark has been with the airline for 4 years. He's the first officer on today's flight.
It was a light snowfall. Temperature was just below freezing and light winds. We were going to fly Stockholm to Copenhagen and then to Warsaw, back to Copenhagen and down to Barcelona that day. It would be quite a long working day.
Stefan Rasmussen has just finished an exterior check of the plane. The Danish pilot is in command this morning.
In those over 12, almost 13,000 hours I've been sitting in an aircraft, I always felt that I put the aircraft and back on like a rucksack. And when we took lift on the wings, we melted together.
The plane Rasmussen is strapping on today is a nearly new DC-9, easily identifiable by its 2 rear engines.
By now, everyone should know that door stays open.
Right.
Even in the days before terrorist threats, flying with the cockpit door open is unusual. It's just one way Rasmussen has endeared himself to the crews and passengers he flies with.
I always had my cabin door open because I found out that if we had the door open and they could see that there were a human being in there, they'd trust you.
For me, it felt good that the door was open. It just feels like you have a connection more than if the door is closed.
The winter weather has delayed this flight, but Rasmussen won't compromise safety for schedule.
Where are we now with the de-icing?
The wings aren't quite done. They've done the underside. Now they're doing the top.
Thank you.
Under Captain Rasmussen's instructions, the ground crew had already de-iced the plane once. Now they're giving it another pass.
And it took a while, but they had trouble getting rid of the snow on top of the wing. So we were slightly late for our pushback out to our runway.
For Captain Per Holmberg, this kind of delay is routine business. He flies DC-9s for the airline. A passenger this morning, he is scheduled to command another flight later that day.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain. I hope you had a good Christmas. We're just getting our wings cleared as we've had a bit of snow overnight. And when that's finished, we're ready for takeoff for some warmer weather. I handpicked the airline's best cabin crew to take care of you today. We all hope you have a nice flight.
Finally, Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 is cleared to proceed. There are buildups of snow that the crew must avoid on the way to the runway.
Would have been nice of them to clear the snow.
Oh, that would have made it too easy. Approaching holding point, runway 08.
Roger, Scandinavian 751. You are cleared for takeoff from runway 08.
Spoilers?
Armed.
Auto brake, takeoff and armed. Runway update performed. Checklist completed.
Set power.
Despite the winter conditions, the takeoff is routine.
V1, rotate.
Gear up.
Gear up selected.
When Wolfie reached out for the gear, I heard things which was different.
Just 25 seconds into the flight, as the plane is climbing, there is a problem.
When you hear things that are different from the normally, you get suspicious. There was a really big roar in the aircraft, almost like an explosion. Boom!
There was another banging noise that I just thought, what is that? I had never heard that before.
It's obvious the source of the noise is the right engine.
It sounds serious. I believe it's a compressor stall.
I took the right throttle and moved a little back, but there it really became strange because the engine performance increased when I reduced the throttle. It's like if you're sitting in your car and you're turning your wheel to the left and the car is driving to the right, you get confused.
We're not supposed to like call into cockpit now. And then I thought, this is an emergency, I have to call the captain.
But Captain Rasmussen doesn't respond to the call. He's too busy trying to figure out what's going wrong with his plane.
I couldn't see anything on the instrument. They were quite stable and a quite normal range, no problem. But I could hear those roaring every second.
He searches for telltale signs of attack or structural failure.
And I looked up at the cabin pressure, because if you have a bomb or a freight door or anything which is ripped off, that'll give a decompression.
In the cabin, pressure levels are stable. But the crew has other concerns.
I saw the smoke and it smelled burnt.
What should we do about this?
Just 3,200 feet above the ground, the emergency escalates. The right engine quits.
When we have flown a little over 1 minute, the right engine just went down. I had a very, very short moment of thinking that I was in a nightmare and just dreaming. I was confused. I was really confused.
2 seconds later, the left engine also quits. The plane is now powerless.
One engine dropped and then another engine dropped. I thought that it wasn't true. It wasn't true. It wasn't real.
Less than a minute and a half after takeoff, the DC-9 begins falling from the sky.
And after that, it was complete silence. And I think that was the worst moment for me. Just being in the air, and it's so quiet. It was like a bird just sailing through the sky. So then I started to get scared.
Engine relay.
As the pilots try to restart their engines, things get even worse. The left engine erupts in flames.
And I saw the exhaust gas temperature was rising rapidly. The max temperature was around 680 degrees Celsius, and I saw it go above 800.
A fire in the engine could spread to the rest of the plane.
Should I pull?
If Sedermark pulls the fire extinguisher in the left engine, he will never be able to restart it. He pulls the handle to put out the fire. From his seat, Captain Per Holmberg can see that the crew is in trouble. Flight 751 is now falling at a rate of 1,200 feet per minute. But air traffic controllers at the Stockholm airport have no idea the plane is in trouble.
Arlanda, Stockholm, Scandinavian 751.
Good morning, SK 751. Climb to flight level 180. We have problems with our engines, please.
We need to go back to Arlanda.
751, roger. Turn right, heading to here.
Suddenly, the radio goes dead. A result of the failed engines. Only the right engine can provide power, but it's now spinning too slowly to generate electricity for the instruments.
Without the engine, you don't have any propulsion, so the only energy you have is your height.
With time running out, the pilots of Flight 751 must find a way to restart the right engine, or else crash into the countryside below. Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 is now falling from the sky at 20 feet per second.
How can I help?
Captain Per Holmberg, who boarded the flight as a passenger, becomes part of the flight crew.
He came out in the cockpit and he said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" I don't think I even said yes. I just said, "Start the APU."
If the auxiliary power unit can be launched, it will bring back the radio and instruments.
So I just handed him the emergency checklist and started focus on controlling the flight to see that we were maintaining the speed and the attitude and that we were wings level. He managed to start the auxiliary power unit, so my flight instruments were supplied from that.
But for some reason, Captain Rasmussen's instruments don't come back online.
He managed to fly the plane basically by feel.
Power is also restored to the cabin, but it's small comfort to passengers who now know they're in extreme danger. Stockholm Air Traffic Control instructs the pilots to return to the airport.
Scandinavian 751, are you able to turn right, heading 090, radar vectoring for 0-1?
But the plane is now just 1,600 feet from the ground. And First Officer Sedermark's attempts to resuscitate it aren't working.
Roger, we are maintaining our heading, but we are trying to restart our engines.
Making a 180-degree turn back to Stockholm could be catastrophic.
I really had the feeling that if I turned the aircraft at that time, we would have stalled.
When you're turning back, you are losing a lot of energy. So the most safe thing to do is actually just to go straight, keep your wings level. That means that you will use less energy of your altitude, so you can maintain your speed.
You can maintain 2,000 feet.
We are not able to maintain 2,000 feet. We are descending. We are at 1,600 feet and descending.
Holmberg wants Rasmussen to focus his attention on finding a landing spot.
Look straight ahead. Look straight ahead.
He was screaming at Stefan, just look straight ahead and watch the flight path.
Prepare for on-ground emergency.
On-ground emergency!
Bend down! Bend down! Bend down! So we shouted bend down, I don't know how many times. Bend down, bend down, bend down.
Keep your seatbelts fastened.
While passengers brace, Rasmussen considers where to land his plane.
Look straight ahead.
And I had an idea that on the northern direction could bring us out to the Baltic Sea, which was at that time frozen. And that's an excellent runway.
But instead, he finds himself gliding powerlessly over a dense forest.
I saw that green area and I saw that little light spot in the middle of the forest, but that really looked short.
Steer right, steer right.
Just 500 feet above the ground, Captain Rasmussen lifts the plane's nose to slow it down. hoping to soften the crash landing.
Pine trees from the top there look very soft. I could use the trees as almost like a pillow.
Should I lower the landing gear?
Yes, gear down.
Bend down and hold your knees.
I prepared myself for a hard impact. If it's an emergency landing, we have no engines, I just thought this is going to be a hard landing.
Stockholm, Scandinavian 751, we are crashing into the ground now.
I wasn't afraid until we were flying into the trees. Then I was scared, and I knew we were not going to make it.
I didn't thought I should die. I knew I should die. I made me pray to God. And then, a moment after, we were in a strange world.
After we have come to a complete stop, I feel the smell of airplane fuel. I thought, okay, we're gonna explode. And I look around and I see the snow because there was a big crack in the airplane fuselage just in front of the aft galley. And you could just walk down on the ground.
Everything was quiet, and I woke up. It might only have been a split second or so.
I was afraid that my spine was broken, that I wouldn't be able to walk again. So I remember I was sitting there and I was moving my toes and my feet just to see if I could have control over them. I had a pain in my hand because I had broken a bone in my hand, and I was bleeding heavily from my forehead, so I was trying to get clear of all the blood that was coming down in my eyes. And Stefan told me that we had to get out of the aircraft.
After plowing through 125 meters of pine forest, the pilot's fear is now that the broken aircraft could catch fire. Dozens of passengers escape through the breaks in the fuselage walls. But Captain Per Holmberg has been knocked unconscious by the crash.
It all went so fast that no one could take in what happened. So I tried to stay with the group of passengers I had there. But I just knew the feeling also that we had to wait a long time for the rescue teams.
Help will be here soon.
Fortunately, no fire materializes. But because they removed their winter clothing while boarding the sweltering plane, many passengers are starting to freeze.
Most people were just standing in their shirts, t-shirts, very, very little clothes. Few didn't even have shoes on.
They are now at risk from hypothermia.
So I focused on being caring. Maybe I did it for my own sake also. I needed a hug also. It was comforting to comfort someone else.
The wreckage of Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 lies just 15 kilometers northeast of Stockholm Arlanda Airport. The fuselage has broken into 3 pieces. In the chaos of the moment, nobody knows how many people have been killed in the crash. Rescuers arrive within minutes and attend to the freezing survivors. They pull Captain Per Holmberg from the cabin, unconscious.
He landed on the wall at impact, and he skidded down on the wall to the floor at impact. So he was quite badly damaged. He cut his eyelid, and he also got his collarbone that was broken off, so his shoulder was in front of him.
92 of the passengers have sustained injuries. Only 8 are considered serious. But when the crew conducts a head count, They're stunned to learn that out of the 129 people who boarded Flight 751, not a single one was killed in the crash.
Everyone survived. It was like a shock just to take in. Wow, that was a fantastic comment.
This was the happiest captain in the world. We were all alive. It was a great moment.
Reporters break the remarkable story to the world as the Swedish Accident Investigation Board, or SAIB, takes charge of the case. Scandinavian Airlines alerts its own investigators, dispatching Tori Hultgren to head up its team.
It's most unusual that the plane crashes in a wooded area and everybody survives. I've never heard of it before. The police kept everybody off the site itself. There was a cordon around the aircraft about 100 meters. We had a complete aircraft, nothing had burned, and we had lots of good data.
Henrik Ullander from the SAIB gets to work on the evidence.
And we all started to plan the documentation of the accident site, which means photographing all the fine little approach through the wood, you know, and to take photos of all the parts that were spread all over the place.
The two black boxes, which record cockpit conversations and store flight data, are recovered immediately. Investigators speak to survivors. Everyone tells a similar story.
Would you mind telling me what you saw and heard?
Loud, booming sounds from the engines moments after the flight began, smoke in the cabin, and finally the entire loss of power and an engine on fire.
You have a twin-engine aircraft, and you are really not supposed to lose both engines at the same time.
The Pratt & Whitney turbofan engines are sent to a Scandinavian Airlines repair shop for closer examination. Investigators are eager to speak with Captain Rasmussen about the incident. But to their dismay, Scandinavian Airlines takes him to the media first.
The first question, what did you think when both engines refused to function? It'll take me an awful long time to tell you all that.
The normal case is that the key witnesses, like the crew and so on, should be kept in quarantine until they meet the investigation board.
European media celebrate Captain Stefan Rasmussen as a hero for landing the DC-9 without engine power. But investigators consider the possibility that he or his co-pilot had made errors that caused the crisis in the first place.
The honor and the glory always rests with the captain, but so does also the mishaps.
I knew that being a person in the spotlight of the press would be a quite different situation. And I said to myself, the only thing you can do now is to give them all their story and then pray that they will find the reason.
Lars Lindberg is an investigative representative for the Swedish Airlines Pilot Association. He examines the wreckage for signs of mechanical or structural failure.
We knew both engines had failed for some reason, so we was concerned what was the background for something like that to happen. The first time I saw the engines in the workshop, I was surprised.
Is this all they found?
There was a number of parts that were completely missing, and this was something we hadn't seen before to this extent.
To find out what happened, investigators must find the missing pieces, which now lie somewhere in snow-covered fields and forests. A close study of Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751's engines reveals exactly which pieces are missing.
Parts of this aircraft was shedding parts from both engines, And then what you do is you go further in and you document everything and you try to find the root cause and see how it all comes together.
The missing pieces could hold the key to discovering why both of the plane's engines quit within seconds of each other. But they could be anywhere along the 15-kilometer route the aircraft covered during its short flight. They must be found. Investigators use the flight data recorder to map the plane's journey and determine where engine parts may have fallen. After scouring the snow-covered fields along the plane's path, the recovery team finds 500 fragments. Just a fraction of what's missing. Many are very badly damaged. Some of the titanium blades actually seem to have been on fire.
You had this titanium fire inside both engines, both the right and the left engine. And this titanium fire is a very unique occurrence. It's requiring very, very high pressure and very high temperature for a titanium blade to catch fire.
Investigators dig deeper into the cause of the engine trouble. The left engine's fuel line is badly dented. It was obviously hit by a fast-moving piece of metal inside the engine. The impact caused it to rupture.
This part got dislodged, it went out and hit a fuel line, and that fuel line cracked, sprayed fuel onto the hot engine.
The engine was clearly coming apart during the flight.
That sounds serious.
The discovery explains the fire in the left engine and why so many pieces of it were found so far from the crash site. But investigators are left wondering why the engines broke up in the first place. A major clue comes from passenger and crew testimonies, which told of repeated booming noises before the left engine caught fire. The cockpit voice recorder picked up these sounds.
So you can hear that, and we could correlate that with when the damage occurred. You can see that on the flight data recorder.
The sounds are familiar to investigators and leave no doubt. The DC-9's engines began surging shortly after takeoff. Jet engines rely on a steady stream of air for combustion. A series of fans move incoming air through various stages of compression. But when that flow is disrupted, fuel at the rear of the engines ignites violently and shoots forward.
That's a surge. You can have a small surge and you can have a large surge. And you can have the complete surge on the whole engine.
Sounds serious.
This surge process was very violent, so after a very short time, we had an aircraft with two engines that could not be restarted, that didn't generate any thrust. Basically, you had a giant glider at that point.
A closer look at the fan blades from the front of the engines explains why they were surging. They're badly dented. The damage would have prevented them from effectively directing air to the rear of the engines.
This damage that twisted the fan blade started this process. You got this disturbed air in the fan, you got this rotating fan stall that then triggered this whole breakdown, the compressor surge, and then the whole process that led up to the dual engine failures.
But what exactly mangled the blades? There are ways to tell.
If it comes from a stone, rubber, ice, and so on, you can see it on the shape of the damage. The ice causes very specific damages. It's sort of like a soft dent.
Analysis of dent patterns on the fan blades is conclusive. They were struck by ice. Now investigators want to find out where the ice could have come from.
Weather data for the 24 hours leading up to the crash.
They know Stockholm had been hit with rain and snow in the hours before Flight 751 took off.
It was a situation with the temperature around 0 degrees. It was a drizzle, snow, rain in the morning.
They learned that the DC-9 arrived from Zurich the night before, with the fuel tanks more than half full.
They had quite a large amount of reserve fuel, of diversion fuel, in their wings. The fuel in the wing tanks were close to minus 20 degrees Celsius.
The conditions that night were ideal for the formation of clear ice on the wing surface.
And here you had very, very cold fuel on the top wing skin. And as the temperature dropped during the night, it went to snow and rain, and finally snow. So there was a layer cake. Ice at the bottom, slush, and snow on top. About 10 inches total on top of the wings in the morning.
Responsibility for de-icing the plane ultimately falls on the captain. Rasmussen insists he was aware of the overnight buildup. Investigators wonder if the pilot did all he could to ensure his plane was completely free of ice. Rasmussen claims he instructed technicians to de-ice the plane thoroughly.
I didn't walk around with the aircraft. It was cold, it was frosty.
Noticing that there was still frost on the wings, the head technician ordered a second round of de-icing.
I was really convinced that the aircraft was clean. And so was he,
Where are we now with the de-icing? The wings aren't quite done. They've done the underside.
The cockpit voice recorder backs up Rasmussen's testimony.
They've got it good and clean under the wings? Yes.
They de-iced the aircraft once and looked at it and I said, once more. And they de-iced us the second time.
In fact, a total of 850 liters of fluid was sprayed on the aircraft. But the fluid may have been faulty, not potent enough to melt the thick layer of ice that had accumulated on the wings overnight. Technicians test samples of the fluid used to de-ice Flight 751.
We found no discrepancies. There was nothing wrong with any of the fluids used.
But when investigators interview the maintenance crew that worked on the plane, they begin wondering if the de-icing team was thorough enough in their efforts. The ground crew insists that after they sprayed the wing, it appeared to be clean. But that appearance was deceptive.
It looked perfect because the clear ice on top of the fuel tanks, you cannot see the clear ice.
A technician inspected the front of the wing and found no ice. He couldn't have known that there was ice further back, out of his reach.
No provisions for stairs or anything that he could use to get up on the wing at the de-icing platform. It looked shiny and nice, couldn't see any ice on it, but still there was maybe an inch of ice on top of the wing when the aircraft took off.
As soon as the plane took flight, the ice became a problem.
On this aircraft, the engines are positioned behind the wings, and as the aircraft rotated and the wings bent in order to take the weight of the aircraft, this ice in the wing roots loosened and it sucked right into the engine.
The ice damaged the fan blades at the front of the engines and ultimately caused them to begin surging.
Nobody really expected that this would happen, or could happen, but it did.
When ice breaks off the wings during flight, it doesn't pose a problem for most aircraft. But the placement of a DC-9's engines leaves them more susceptible to being struck. The Pratt & Whitney engines on Flight 751 were designed to withstand this type of ice ingestion. Something else must explain the disaster. Investigators know that the wrong reaction by a pilot can make surges worse. They comb through the flight data to see what these pilots did when the emergency struck.
The first thing you do when you have a surge, if you recognize it as a surge, is that you reduce power.
Captain Rasmussen claims he did just that.
Of course, you just pull the throttle back, and then you have the balance between the incoming fuel and incoming air. And that was actually what I did.
But the flight data recorder tells a different story.
Why is the engine power increasing?
It clearly shows that in the moments after the surge, thrust was reduced, but then seconds later was increased to beyond full power.
Yeah, it didn't add up because the RPM was increasing to 110%, and the throttle position was moving. It shouldn't be. The only thing that could move the throttles in clamp was the pilot's hand.
But if Rasmussen didn't push the throttles forward, something else did. It would explain the captain's confusion as his engines began to surge.
As a pilot, when you've gone through the training, you've done all your emergency training, you've been through the simulator, and now you have a system that is doing something that you don't expect, it's very confusing.
Despite their relentless efforts, investigators can find no possible explanation for the increase in thrust.
The frustrating part with the investigation was that we could not figure out why the system did what it did.
Then, almost 2 months after the accident, the plane's manufacturer provides the answer. The culprit is something called automatic thrust restoration.
It's brand new. It automatically increases the thrust during the climb.
Swedish authorities learned that automatic thrust restoration, or ATR, was recently introduced as a safety feature on Scandinavian Airlines planes. It existed because the FAA had discovered some pilots were throttling back considerably while taking off and landing to reduce noise over residential neighborhoods. The ATR was designed to make it impossible for them to throttle back to dangerous levels.
So as soon as he powered back, the system kicked in.
Investigators learned that when Rasmussen reduced power to clear his engine surge, the system read this as a dangerously low power setting and pushed the throttles forward. The increased thrust made the surging worse until the engines destroyed themselves. The investigation concludes that the pilots had taken the right steps to clear the surge and prevent the catastrophe. But the computer code which governs the ATR undermined their efforts.
A strip of zeros and ones caused the throttles to move and caused the engines that were stalling because they already got too much fuel, got even more fuel. And they went into self-destruct, both engines. In a few seconds, they're both totally destroyed.
The system was so new to Scandinavian Airlines that nobody there had even heard of it.
And it was confusing for everyone because we didn't know about the system, we didn't have information on the system. SAS didn't know the system existed on their aircraft.
We hadn't bought that modification. And it was sneaked in via another system.
Because he didn't know about the ATR, Rasmussen was unaware that he could only save his plane by switching it off. News that the automatic thrust restoration was responsible for the accident proved both a blessing and a curse for Captain Rasmussen. It eliminated any notion that he had made a mistake.
When I got that message, I was really released. It was like winning in the lottery. It was, because I was so happy. Because then I could explain why I was in that total cone of confusion.
But the fallout would ultimately destroy a love affair and end a career. On October the 20th, 1993, the Swedish Accident Investigation Board releases its report on the crash of Flight 751. It determines that the actions of Captain Rasmussen and First Officer Sedermark contributed to the safe outcome of this incident. And although investigators question Captain Per Holmberg's decision to enter the cockpit in the first place, they do praise his contribution.
This crew flew until they stood still on the ground. They never gave up. They never gave up. They didn't give an inch.
The investigators put much of the blame for the accident on Scandinavian Airlines because their procedures for checking for clear ice were inadequate.
It's a compressor stall.
The report also condemns the fact that the pilots didn't know about the automatic thrust restoration and how it would act in a surge situation.
If the ATR system hadn't been there, if the trolleys hadn't moved forward, there wouldn't have been an accident.
It was a bit strange that we didn't have all the documentation available to us, so we knew what we could expect if something like this would happen.
In the wake of the crash, Scandinavian Airlines started training its pilots how to use the ATR system. They also implemented steps to ensure airplanes don't take off with clear ice on the wings.
We changed all the procedures, we provided stairs for the mechanic, and we made it a requirement to go up on top of the wing and touch it with your hand to verify after de-icing.
After healing from his injuries, First Officer Ulf Sedermark returned to the cockpit.
I didn't feel the responsibility that I wouldn't be able to do my job again. Whatever happens, I know that I still can see things for what they are. And I still love doing my job, and if something bad happens, I can deal with it.
But Stefan Rasmussen's return proved far more difficult.
Set power.
After I'd heard from a high-skilled psychologist, we talked about getting in the air again. He knew that that would be a hard decision to take.
Gear up. Fire drill.
After time in the simulator, Rasmussen couldn't regain confidence in his plane.
Sorry, guys.
In a disaster situation, in a crisis, is that you have optimized the teamwork between man and machine. I really felt that I didn't trust the aircraft.
Pilots tend to take the responsibility for all that went wrong. Too much of the glory and also too much of the responsibility.
With the right counseling, about 90% of pilots involved in an accident are able to continue flying. Even though Captain Rasmussen received treatment, his career ended with the crash of Flight 751.
Taking that decision to leave aviation as pilot was like having your highest love and come to that conclusion that you have to kill her. I had many hours, many missions of happiness in an aircraft. And I loved my passengers, I loved my aircraft so much, so I said, that's it. I never regretted, never. And I think I was right.